Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto had the power of Kaguya, Shinigami Arceus, god of Carnage Naruto. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Convergence of Fates. Blood splattered across ancient stone as Naruto crashed through the temple wall, his body carving a jagged furrow into sacred ground untouched for centuries. Dust billowed around him, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs as he fought to regain his bearings. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong in ways he couldn't have anticipated. What should have been simple reconnaissance had transformed into a desperate struggle for survival against enemies wielding powers he'd never encountered before. Is this really all the Nine Tails Jinchuriki has to offer? The voice cut through the settling debris, melodic yet venomous. Disappointing. Lord Pain described you as unpredictable. Naruto pushed himself upright, ignoring the burning protest of torn muscles and fractured ribs. Through the haze, he caught glimpses of his attacker, a woman with hair like liquid mercury and eyes that shifted between violet and an unfathomable darkness. She wasn't wearing standard Akatsuki robes, but the red clouds adorned her collar. And that was enough. Her fingers traced unfamiliar seals with unsettling grace. I haven't even started, Naruto growled, forming the cross-shaped hand seal that had become his signature. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Nothing happened. For the first time in years, the familiar surge of chakra failed to respond to his command. Panic fluttered in his chest as he tried again, only to feel something fundamentally wrong with his network. His chakra wasn't just blocked, it felt rerouted, as though flowing through unfamiliar channels. The woman laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally around the ancient chamber. Your chakra belongs to the void now, child. The seal our scientists crafted specifically for you is already working its way through your system. Naruto's hand flew to his stomach, where the seal containing the nine tails had suddenly begun to burn with an intensity he'd never experienced before. Instead of the familiar spiral pattern, he could feel new, alien symbols spreading outward like frost across glass. What did you do to me? He demanded, backing away as the woman advanced. Behind her, two more figures emerged from the shadows. One was massive, easily 7 feet tall with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The other moved with mechanical precision, metal components visible beneath tattered robes. We've ved beyond Pain's crude extraction methods, the woman explained, examining her nails as though they were discussing the weather. Why take the nine tails when we can convert its chakra, and yours, into something far more valuable? The dimensional essence we'll harvest will fuel the next phase of our operation. Naruto didn't understand half of what she was saying, but the predatory intent was unmistakable. These weren't ordinary Akatsuki members. Something about them felt fundamentally wrong, as if they weren't fully present in this reality. A thunderous boom shook the temple as the massive figure brought down a hammer-like appendage where Naruto had been standing seconds before. Only instinct and years of training had allowed him to dodge, but even that simple movement sent waves of agony through his disrupted chakra network. You can't run forever, the mechanical figure stated, voice distorted through some kind of modulator. The seal is designed to harvest your energy as you use it. Every technique, every movement accelerates the process. Naruto felt his back press against the far wall of the temple chamber. 3-on-1 with no chakra, no backup, and no plan. The situation was beyond dire, edging toward hopeless. His mind raced through scenarios, each ending more dismally than the last. The woman raised her hand, and reality itself seemed to warp around her fingers. Quote, your contribution to our cause will be remembered, Jinchuriki. Though I doubt that's much comfort. Everything slowed down as Naruto faced his impending death. In that stretched moment, he became acutely aware of his heartbeat. The air filling his lungs, the way light filtered through broken temple walls. He wouldn't die here. He couldn't. Too many promises remained unfulfilled, too many people were counting on him. As the woman's attack launched toward him, a spiraling vortex of what looked like distorted space, Naruto did the only thing left in his arsenal. He reached deep inside, past the barriers that had always separated him from the nine tails, past the safeguards the fourth Hokage had implemented, diving straight into the core of the seal itself. I need your power, He whispered inwardly, not commanding but asking. Not for me, for everyone I've promised to protect. The familiar, malevolent chakra didn't answer, but something else did. Deep within the seal, where the bound are, i.e. between Naruto's consciousness and the Nine Tails had always existed, he felt three distinct presences suddenly stir. One radiated ancient, primordial power that made the fox's chakra seem gentle by comparison. Another exuded cold, implacable stillness like death itself. The third felt vast beyond comprehension, as if an entire universe was contained within it. Time fractured. The temple, the Akatsuki. The material world itself seemed to fall away as Naruto found himself floating in an impossible space where three titanic forces converged. He couldn't see them clearly, their forms shifted constantly, defying comprehension, but he could feel their awareness focusing on him with devastating intensity. Who? What are you? Naruto managed to ask within this mental landscape. Fragments. Came a response that wasn't quite a voice. Broken, scattered, converged. Another presence pushed forward. Vessel of convergence. Nexus of planes. Ours and not ours. The third simply observed, it's at. Tension alone nearly overwhelming Naruto's sense of self. I don't understand, Naruto admitted, feeling the imminent collapse of the mental space around him as the Akatsuki's attack neared in the physical world. But if you have power, I need it now, please. We are not separate, the first presence stated. We are you now. You are us now. Take what is already yours, added the second. The third presence finally communicated with a concept rather than words, union. Naruto reached out mentally toward all three simultaneously, and everything exploded. In the physical world, the Akatsuki Woman's attack was microseconds from impact when Naruto's body erupted with light that defied classification. Not the red chakra of the Nine Tails, not the blue of his normal energy, but a shifting aurora of colors that seemed to include shades that had never existed in the natural world. The woman screamed, not in triumph but in sudden terror as her attack dissipated against an invisible barrier. The temple wasn't merely illuminated by the light pouring from Naruto, it was transformed. Ancient stone vibrated at frequencies that made it shimmer between solid matter and something else entirely. Gravity fluctuated wildly, causing debris to float upward before crashing down again. What is this? The massive Akatsuki member roared, backing away as cracks appeared in the air itself around Naruto. This isn't the Nine Tails chakra. This isn't in our briefing. Naruto stood motionless at the center of the maelstrom, eyes closed, expression serene despite the chaos. When he finally looked up, his eyes had transformed. His right eye displayed a ripple pattern of purple concentric circles, reminiscent of the legendary Rinnegan but with key differences, symbols that appeared to be from an unknown WN language rotated slowly within each circle. His left eye had become completely black except for pinprick stars that seemed to reflect actual constellations. When he exhaled, frost formed in the air despite the summer heat. You wanted to harvest dimensional essence, Naruto spoke, his voice overlaid with harmonic undertones that made the temple foundations tremble. You should have been more careful about what you unleashed. The mechanical Akatsuki member launched forward, arms transforming into bladed weapons. Whatever this is, we'll still complete our. He never finished the sentence. Naruto didn't appear to move, yet suddenly stood behind the attacker. No blur of motion, no sound of movement, simply an instantaneous transition from one position to another as though the intervening space didn't exist. Your seal created a conduit, Naruto explained conversationally as the mechanical figure collapsed, bisected by a cut so clean it took several seconds for the halves to separate. But not in the direction you intended. The woman recovered first, her hands forming seals at blinding speed. Dimensional style. Void collapse. The air between them folded inward, creating a miniature black hole that began pulling everything toward its hungry maw. Stone, dust, and even light itself bent toward the singularity, yet Naruto remained unmoved, as though anchored to reality itself. Interesting technique, he noted, raising a hand toward the phenomenon, but fundamentally flawed in its understanding of dimensional boundaries. His fingers twisted in a gesture that resembled no known hand seal. And the black hole inverted, turning inside out before dissolving into motes of light that drifted upward like fireflies. The woman stared in disbelief, her confidence shattered. Impossible, she whispered. Those equations took our scientists years too. Your understanding is incomplete, Naruto interrupted. He wasn't being arrogant or boastful, he was simply stating a fact. Chi with the detached certainty of someone reciting established knowledge. You're trying to manipulate forces you've only glimpsed through keyholes. The massive Akatsuki member had apparently decided. Retreat was the wiser option and was backing toward the temple entrance. Naruto glanced in his direction, and reality rippled between them. The fleeing figure suddenly found himself back in the center of the chamber. As though the space he'd traversed had been folded and rearranged. You came for me, Naruto said, his voice carrying neither anger nor excitement, just quiet determination. You'll all stay until I understand exactly what you've done. For the first time, fear flickered across the woman's face. You don't want to do this. You don't understand what's happening to you. We can help. No more lies. Naruto cut her off. He raised his hand again, and concentric rings of light formed around his wrist, spinning like miniature galaxies. Show me the truth. The rings expanded outward, passing through the woman like scanning waves. She screamed, not in pain but in existential terror, as information flooded from her mind into Naruto's consciousness. Images, knowledge, memories transferred between them in an instant. Naruto saw fragmented visions. Laboratories hidden deep underground, scientists working with equipment that seemed centuries beyond current technology, experiments on subjects with Kekkei Genkei. And at the center of it all, rifts. Cheers in reality leading to places that shouldn't exist, leaking energies that transformed everything they touched. He saw the man, Shinra was her name, being transformed by controlled exposure to these rifts, gaining abilities that defied the conventional understanding of chakra. Most disturbing of all, he saw their true objective. They hadn't come for the Nine Tails specifically. They'd been hunting all sources of abnormal chakra, harvesting them to stabilize the largest rift they'd discovered, a portal they believed would lead to the source of all chakra. All energy, all creation. As the knowledge transfer completed, Shinra collapsed to her knees, her consciousness nearly shattered by the invasive technique. The massive figure rushed Naruto from behind, his hammer arm crackling with unusual energy. Without looking, Naruto made a dismissive gesture. The air behind him suddenly pressurized to such an extent that the attacker was compressed into a space no larger than a marble, which then vanished with a soft pop as it slipped between dimensional boundaries. You've been experimenting with forces beyond your comprehension, Naruto told Shinra. Crouching beside her trembling form. Breaking barriers that existed for reasons you never bothered to understand. We sought power, she whispered, blood trickling from her eyes. Evolution, transcendence, and now you have my attention. Naruto placed his palm against her forehead. Sleep. When you wake, we'll see if anything human remains in you to save. Her eyes rolled back, and she slumped unconscious to the stone floor. Naruto stood, surveying the devastated temple with new awareness. The structure wasn't merely ancient, it had been built atop a natural dimensional weak point. A place where the barriers between worlds naturally thinned. The Akatsuki's activities had exacerbated this thinning, and now, Naruto looked down at his hands. Watch. Hinga's energy unlike anything in the shinobi world coursed beneath his skin. The knowledge transferred from Shinra explained some of what was happening to him, but only fragments. The seal they'd use, D wasn't functioning as intended. Instead of draining his power, it had somehow activated dormant aspects of his being, connecting him to entities and energies that should have remained separate. He could feel them now. 3 distinct presences sharing his consciousness. Kaguya Otsutsuki, progenitor of chakra, whose residual energy had apparently lingered in the world far more extensively than anyone had realized. The Shinigami itself, death incarnate, whose essence had intertwined with his own during some forgotten interaction with the seal that contained the 9 tails. And something else, something from beyond even these primordial forces, a presence that called itself Arceus, a creator entity from a dimension so far removed from the shinobi world that contact should have been impossible. All 3 had been drawn into the convergence initiated by the Akatsuki's flawed seal, using Naruto as their nexus point, their avatar in this realm. And none of them seemed particularly interested in separating again. A distant explosion jolted Naruto from his internal dialogue. Outside the temple, chaos was unfolding. The convergence hadn't affected just him, it was spreading outward, weak ending dimensional barriers throughout the region. He could sense distortions forming miles away, reality bending in ways it was never meant to bend. This was far bigger than a simple Akatsuki attack. Far bigger than one shinobi with unusual new powers. The very fabric of their world was beginning to unravel. Naruto took one last look at Shinra's unconscious form before making his decision. Old need to bring her back to Konoha for interrogation. Whatever the Akatsuki had started, he needed to understand it fully if he had any hope of containing the damage. As he bent to lift her, a voice called from the temple entrance. Naruto. He turned, instinctively dropping into a defensive stance before recognizing the chakra signature, although it too had changed, become something more complex than he remembered. Hinata Hyuga stood framed in the doorway, her Byakugan activated, but not in any way Naruto had seen before. Instead of the familiar pale eyes with prominent veins, her gaze had transformed. Concentric circles of silver and lavender rotated slowly around her pupils, and her vision appeared to be tracking things invisible to normal perception. Hinata, he straightened, suddenly aware of how his new appearance might frighten her. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. She stepped forward cautiously, seemingly unafraid despite the destruction surrounding them in Naruto's transformed state. I saw it, she whispered. 3 days ago, during meditation. I saw you surrounded by 3 lights, and the world splitting open. Naruto blinked in surprise. You had a vision about this? Hinata nodded, approaching closer. Her movement had changed too, more fluid, as though partially untethered from gravity's pull. My Byakugan evolved after I encountered one of the rifts near the Hyuga compound. She explained, gesturing to her transformed eyes. I can see, between things now. Between worlds. Between possibilities. Her gaze focused sharply on him. What happened to you, Naruto? You're resonating across multiple planes simultaneously. The clinical precision of her analysis surprised him almost as much as her newfound confidence. This wasn't the shy, hesitant Hinata he'd known for years. Something fundamental had changed in her as well. The Akatsuki tried using some kind of experimental seal on me, he explained, gesturing toward the unconscious Shinra. Instead of extracting the 9 tails, it triggered this. I'm connected to 3 entities now, all at once. Hinata's enhanced eyes narrowed as she studied him, seeing far more than his physical form. Kaguya's primal chakra, the Shinigami's death essence, and, she paused, her expression becoming one of awe, something from beyond our conceptual framework entirely. A creator entity. You can see all that? Naruto asked, genuinely impressed. Not see, exactly, perceive. She moved closer still, unafraid. They're using you as an anchor point, a convergence nexus to manifest in our reality. Her hand reached out tentatively. May I? When he nodded, her fingers gently touched his chest, right over his heart. The contact created an immediate reaction, a circuit completing. Naruto gasped as his awareness suddenly expanded exponentially, and he could see what Hinata was perceiving. The world around them was merely one layer of reality, like the surface of a pond. Below, and above and beside it existed other layers, other dimensions pressing against theirs, some trying to break through, others merely existing in parallel. The Akatsuki's experiments had created points of weakness. Tiny tears in the fabric separating these realities. And worst of all, something vast and hungry had noticed these tears. Something was pushing against the boundaries, testing their strength, seeking entry. Hinata broke the contact, her expression grave. You feel it too. Naruto nodded, his transformed eyes tracking the invisible currents of interdimensional pressure. Something's trying to break through. Something big. The rifts are appearing all across the Fire Country, Hinata explained urgently. Small at first. Strange phenomena, unexplained sightings, equipment malfunctioning. But they're growing. The Hokage dispatched multiple teams after civilians started disappearing near the disturbances. How did you find me? Naruto asked, lifting the unconscious Shinra over his shoulder. I didn't find you, Hinata replied, her voice taking on that new, confident tone that still surprised him. I followed the convergence pattern. All dimensional disturbances are emanating from this point outward. Like ripples from a stone dropped in water. She looked at him meaningfully. You're the stone, Naruto. The implication wasn't lost on him. Whatever had happened here, He was now the epicenter of a potentially catastrophic event. Every instinct told him to return to Konoha immediately, to get help from Tsunade and the village's seal masters. But another part, the EU awareness granted by the three entities now sharing his consciousness, recognized that conventional shinobi wisdom would be useless against what was coming. We need to contain this, he said, decision made. And I need to understand exactly what I've become before I return to the village. Hinata nodded, unsurprised by his conclusion. I know a place, an ancient Hyuga meditation temple built on a natural chakra convergence point. If these entities are trying to communicate through you, that's where you'll have the best chance of establishing controlled contact. Naruto looked at her with new appreciation. This assertive, knowledgeable Hinata was unexpected but exactly what he needed right now. Lead the way, he said, adjusting Shinra's weight on his shoulder. But first, he held out his free hand, focusing on the new energies flowing through him. A ripple passed through the air, and suddenly the temple's damaged structure began repairing itself, stone flowing like liquid back into its proper place. Cracks sealing as though time were reversing. Hinata watched in fascination. Kaguya's creation ability, partially, Naruto confirmed, still somewhat surprised by his own capabilities. Mixed with Arceus's concept of rightness, returning things to their proper state. He frowned slightly. I'm not controlling these powers so much as suggesting directions for them. That will change with practice, Hinata said with unexpected certainty. The Byakugan histories speak of others who've bridged dimensional boundaries before. None with your specific combination, but the principle remains. Mastery comes through understanding, not force. They exited the restored temple together, stepping into the forest beyond. Night had fallen during the confrontation, and stars glittered overhead. Naruto glanced upward and felt a strange resonance. The patterns above seemed to match the stars in his transformed left eye. The constellations are wrong, he noted quietly. Hinata followed his gaze. No, they're right. Just not for our reality. Your perception is shifting between dimensional frameworks. She pointed eastward. The temple is a half-day's journey that way, if we travel conventionally. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the qualification. And unconventionally. For the first time, Hinata smiled. A confident, almost mischievous expression he'd never seen on her before. With your new abilities, seconds, potentially, but I wouldn't recommend it until you have better control. Dimensional transportation with an unconscious prisoner might have unfortunate results. Conventional travel it is, Naruto agreed, falling into step beside her as they headed into the forest. They traveled in silence for a time, Naruto acclimating to his transformed senses will. Hinata navigated with her evolved Byakugan. The forest around them seemed both familiar and alien now. He could perceive energy flows through living organisms, see the slow pulse of sap through tree trunks. Feel the minute adjustments of nocturnal animals avoiding their path. There's so much I never noticed before, he murmured after nearly an hour of quiet travel. It's like I was blind my entire life. It's overwhelming at first, Hinata acknowledged, smoothly avoiding a branch that would have caught anyone else unaware in the darkness. When my Byakugan evolved, I couldn't sleep for days. Too much information, too many layers of reality all demanding attention simultaneously. Naruto glanced at her with newfound respect. How did you manage it? Hyuga meditation techniques, adapted for the new perceptions. She pushed aside a curtain of vines, revealing a small clearing. We should rest here briefly. Your prisoner is regaining consciousness. Sure enough, Shinra was beginning to stir on Naruto's shoulder. He carefully set her down against a tree trunk, creating chakra restraints that bound her securely. As her eyes fluttered open, he noted they had changed. The violet is now flecked with the same otherworldly colors that coursed through his own chakra network. Where, she began, before focusing on Naruto. Terror flashed across her face. What have you done to me? I've done nothing but witness what you've done to yourself, Naruto replied evenly. Your experiments with dimensional rifts changed you long before we met. Shinra struggled against her restraints before slumping in defeat. You don't understand. None of you understand what's coming. Then explain it, Hinata interjected, stepping into Shinra's line of sight. The Akatsuki members' eyes widened at the sight of Hinata's transformed Byakugan. Another one. She looked between them in disbelief. How many of you are there? Answer the question. Naruto pressed, allowing just a fraction of his new power to leak into his voice. The air around them vibrated in response. Shinra swallowed hard. The Akatsuki you knew was gone. Transformed. After Pain's defeat, those who remained encountered something, someone, from beyond the boundaries of our world. An entity that showed us the true nature of chakra, its origins, its potential. Her voice took on a reverential quality. We've spent years preparing for the convergence, the moment when the barriers between dimensions would be at their weakest. And that moment is now. Hinata asked, her evolved eyes narrowing. No, Shinra laughed bitterly. It wasn't supposed to be for another year. Our calculations were precise. But then, she looked at Naruto accusingly. You happened. Something about you caused an acceleration. The seal was designed to harvest and store your unique chakra signature, not trigger, whatever this is. Naruto exchanged a glance with Hinata. The convergence of the three entities inside me wasn't part of your plan. 3. Shinra's eyes widened. Our intelligence indicated only the 9 tails. What are you? Before Naruto could respond, a tremor passed through the ground beneath them. Not an earthquake. Something more fundamental, as though reality itself shuddered. Overhead, the stars briefly shifted position, rearranging into impossible patterns before settling back into place. It's starting, Shinra whispered, real fear in her voice now. The accelerated convergence. We're all going to die. Hinata activated her Byakugan fully, the concentric circles spinning rapidly as she surveyed their surroundings. Dimensional pressure is building exponentially. The barrier between worlds is thinning all around us. Naruto felt it too, a stretching sensation, as though the fabric of existence was being pulled taut to the point of tearing. Within him, the three entities stirred with greater urgency, their combined consciousness pushing against the boundaries of his mind. Confluence approaches. The presence he associated with Kaguya communicated. The veil weakens. Death and rebirth of reality, the Shinigami aspect added. The cycle continues. The Arceus entity remains silent. But Naruto sensed its focus intensifying, as though preparing for something monumental. We need to reach that temple now, Naruto decided, turning to Hinata. Conventional travel is too slow. She nodded, concern evident despite her composed exterior. Your control is limited, I know. But we're out of options. He glanced at Shinra. She's coming with us. Her knowledge might be useful. Hinata didn't waste time arguing. I'll guide you. My perception can navigate the dimensional currents. What are you planning? Shinra demanded, struggling against her restraints with renewed panic. Naruto crouched beside her, saving your life, hopefully. Along with everyone else's. He placed one hand on her bound wrists and extended the other toward Hinata, who took it without hesitation. This might be unpleasant. Drawing on the Arceus aspect of his new powers, Naruto focused on the concept of transition, rather than specific coordinates. Hinata's evolved Byakugan provided the directional guidance, her mind linking with his through their connected hands. The forest around them began to blur as reality itself became malleable. Shinra screamed as her body started to become translucent, the boundaries of her physical form momentarily uncertain. Naruto maintained his focus, allowing Hinata's perception to guide them through the dimensional currents toward their destination. He felt himself stretching across multiple planes simultaneously, existing in several places at once while also traveling between them. For a timeless moment, they existed everywhere and now. Here, suspended in a state beyond conventional reality. Naruto glimpsed impossible landscapes, worlds where the fundamental laws of physics operated differently, realms of pure conceptual energy without physical form. Through it all, Hinata's presence anchored him, her evolved Byakugan navigating the chaos with remarkable precision. Then, with a sensation like reality snapping back into place, the Y materialized on a stone platform atop a forested mountain. Ancient columns surrounded them, carved with symbols that now made perfect sense to Naruto's transformed awareness. They were dimensional coordinates, mapped in a system predating the shinobi world itself. Shinra collapsed to her knees, vomiting uncontrollably from the transportation experience. Hinata stumbled but remained standing, her hand still firmly gripping Naruto's. We made it, she confirmed, her voice slightly strained. The Hyuga Celestial Temple. Naruto took in their surroundings with his enhanced perception. The temple wasn't merely built, It was grown, coaxed from living stone along natural energy channels. Its position corresponded precisely with cosmic alignments that facilitated interdimensional awareness. Your ancestors knew, he realized, examining the intricate carvings more closely. They understood about the other dimensions, the thinning of barriers. Hinata nodded. The original Byakugan was a G.I. fort, or perhaps an accident, of dimensional bleeding. The Hyuga histories speak of the time before separation, when reality was more fluid. She gestured to the temple around them. This place was built to monitor those separations, to ensure they remained intact. Fat lot of good it did, Shinra muttered, wiping her mouth as she struggled to regain her composure. The barriers are collapsing all around us now. Your precious temple can't stop what's coming. Perhaps not alone, Naruto acknowledged, moving toward the center of the platform where a circular depression held what appeared to be a pool of perfectly still water. But it was never meant to work alone. He knelt beside the pool, recognizing it as no ordinary water but a dimensional medium, a substance existing simultaneously in multiple realities. When he gazed into its surface, he didn't see his reflection but rather infinite variations of himself stretching across countless possible worlds. What do we do now? Hinata asked, joining him beside the pool. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself. Now we find out exactly what's happening to our world, and how to stop it. He placed his palm on the surface of the pool, which rippled not like water but like space-time itself. I need to fully communicate with the entities inside me. This convergence point should make that possible. Hinata placed her hand on his shoulder. Her evolved Byakugan activating fully. I'll monitor the dimensional currents. If something tries to break through while you're communing, I'll warn you. Naruto nodded gratefully before turning his attention to Shinra, who was watching them with a mixture of fear and fascination. You wanted to understand dimensional power. Here's your chance to observe it firsthand. Without waiting for her response, he closed his eyes and submerged his consciousness into the pool, diving deep into the confluence of entities within him. The temple, the mountain, the physical world fell away. Naruto found himself in an impossible mental landscape where three titanic powers converged around his comparatively tiny human consciousness. They had distinct forms now, more comprehensible than during their first contact. Kaguya appeared much as historical records depicted her, but infinitely vaster, her body composed of swirling primordial chakra that constantly created and destroyed matter. The Shinigami manifested as a spectral entity of impossible proportions, cloaked in darkness that consumed light, with a mask-like face featuring eyes that contained galaxies of souls. Arceus too, the form of a quadrupedal being of blinding radiance, its body ringed with what appeared to be a golden wheel, each segment containing an aspect of creation itself. All three focused on Naruto's consciousness with intensity that would have obliterated a lesser mind. Why are you here? Naruto asked, his mental voice steady despite the overwhelming presences surrounding him. Why now? Why me? Convergence point. Kaguya's aspect responded. The cycle returns to its origin. Boundaries weakening, the Shinigami added. The great devourer seeks entry. Balance must be restored, Arceus concluded. You are the vessel of restoration. Naruto struggled to process their cryptic responses. What is the great devourer? What's trying to enter our world? Images flooded his consciousness. A vast, thing darkness existing between dimensions, a hunger without form or constraint, consuming entire realities and growing stronger with each absorption. It had noticed their world now, attracted by the dimensional experiments the transformed Akatsuki had been conducting. The rifts, Naruto realized. They're like beacons, drawing this entity's attention. Correct, all three confirmed simultaneously. And the accelerating convergence, my transformation, necessary countermeasure, Kaguya's aspect explained. Your world would not survive conventional contact. We were always within you, the Shinigami clarified. Dormant, separate. The Akatsuki's seal merely awakened and united us. You were chosen long before your birth, Arceus added. The confluence of bloodlines, circumstances, and potential. The implications staggered Naruto's consciousness. His entire existence, from his parents' union to his status as a Jinchuriki, had been guided by forces beyond human comprehension, preparing him for this moment. So what happens now? He asked, his mental voice small against the cosmic entities surrounding him. How do I stop this? Great Devourer. You must become. They responded in unison. The concept behind the simple words far more complex than language could express. Fully integrated. Vessel and power as one. Become what, exactly? Naruto pressed, sensing they were withholding crucial information. The god of carnage. Kaguya's aspect stated with chilling finality. Destroyer to prevent ultimate destruction. Cruel mercy. Images filled Naruto's mind, himself wielding powers beyond imagination, systematically destroying the rifts throughout the world, cauterizing reality itself. The process would be devastating, causing widespread damage and potentially casualties, but nothing compared to what would happen if the Great Devourer gained entry. There must be another way, Naruto insisted, his core values rebelling against the destructive path they outlined. I protect people. I don't sacrifice them for some greater good. The Devourer approaches, the Shinigami warned. Time grows short. Balance requires sacrifice, Arceus added, its radiance dimming slightly as if in regret. Creation through destruction. Renewal through endings. Before Naruto could argue further, the mental landscape shuddered violently. Outside, in the physical world, something was happening. He felt Hinata's grip on his shoulder tighten, her voice calling to him from across the dimensional divide. Naruto. Something's breaking through. His consciousness rocketed back to his physical form. Opening his transformed eyes, he saw Hinata standing defensively before him, facing a tear in reality that had formed at the edge of the temple platform. Through the rift, something dark and formless pushed against the boundaries of their world, testing its strength. Shinra had backed against a column, terror evident on her face. It's found us, she whispered. The entity our leaders communed with. But it's wrong. Different than they described. They only saw what it wanted them to see, Naruto realized, rising fluidly to his feet. The three powers within him were fully aligned now, responding to the immediate threat. It used the Akatsuki to weaken the barriers. The rift widened, space-time buckling around its edges as something massive began pushing through. The air grew heavy, difficult to breathe, as though reality itself was being compressed by the entity's approach. Naruto stepped forward, placing himself between the rift and his companions. Drawing on all three aspects of his new power simultaneously, he extended his hand toward the dimensional tier. Energy unlike anything the shinobi world had ever witnessed coalesced around him, not chakra as traditionally understood, but something more fundamental. The raw material from which reality itself was constructed. I reject your entry, Naruto stated, his voice carrying the harmonized authority of the entities within him. This world is under my protection. The darkness beyond the rift paused, as though surprised by the resistance. Then it surged forward with renewed force, the tear widening exponentially. A tendril of absolute void slipped through, touching the temple floor, which immediately began to disintegrate at a molecular level. Naruto didn't hesitate, embracing the title the entities had bestowed upon him. God of Carnage, he released a focused beam of energy directly into the rift. The attack wasn't designed to harm the entity directly, but rather to cauterize the dimensional wound, sealing it closed before more could emerge. The resulting collision of energies created a shockwave that knocked Hinata and Shinra off their feet. The temple columns cracked but held as reality itself seemed to scream in protest. The rift shuddered, contracting slightly before stabilizing. It's too strong, Hinata called out, her evolved Byakugan tracking energies invisible to normal perception. The barrier between dimensions is too weak in this location. She was right. Naruto could feel the entity pushing against his power, its vast consciousness focused entirely on this single point of entry. Worse, he sensed similar rifts forming elsewhere. The creature was probing for weaknesses, attacking multiple points simultaneously. A cold realization settled over him. The entities within had been rigged. About one thing. Half measures wouldn't work. If he wanted to save this world, he would need to fully embrace what he had become. Hinata, he called out, maintaining his energy barrier against the rift. I need your help. Your evolved Byakugan can see the dimensional currents. You need to guide my power to the right points. She nodded without hesitation, moving to his side. What are you planning? Something dangerous, he admitted. I'm going to channel all three powers at maximum capacity. It might be difficult to control. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're going to become what they want you to be. The god of carnage. Only temporarily, he assured her, though uncertainty clouded his voice. Just long enough to seal this rift and stabilize the dimensional boundaries. The doubt must have shown on his face, because Hinata's expression softened. With remarkable boldness that her former self would never have displayed, she reached up and placed her palm against his cheek. "I'll bring you back," she promised, her evolved eyes meeting his transformed gaze without fear. "No matter what happens, I'll find a way to reach you." The simple declaration steadied him. Naruto nodded gratefully before turning back to the rift, where the darkness continued to push against his barrier. "Stand back," he warned. "This will be intense." As Hinata moved to a safer distance, Naruto fully embraced the three cosmic forces within him. No longer keeping them compartmentalized or controlled, he allowed them to flow freely through every cell, every molecule of his being. His physical form began to change, transcending normal human limitations. His skin took on an ethereal quality, simultaneously solid and translucent, with patterns of cosmic energy flowing beneath the surface. His hair lengthened and floated upward as though underwater, shifting between golden brightness and deepest black. A halo of truth-seeking orbs manifested around him, but unlike the standard version. These contained swirling galaxies of possibility within each sphere. Most dramatically, spectral manifestations of each entity emerged partially from his transformed body, Kaguya's flowing white hair and third eye. The Shinigami's death mask and ceremonial tanto, Arceus's golden wheel and radiant light. All three overlapped with Naruto's central form, creating a composite being of tremendous power and impossible geometry. When he spoke, his voice resonated across multiple frequencies simultaneously. "I see you, Devourer. I know what you are." The darkness beyond the rift paused again. But this time Naruto sensed not surprise but recognition. The entity knew him, or rather, knew the powers he now wielded. For the first time, it retreated slightly, the tendril withdrawing back through the rift. Naruto pressed his advantage, channeling the combined cosmic forces through his transformed body. The truth-seeking orbs expanded, each becoming a miniature weapon of reality enforcement. He launched them not at the rift itself, but at precise points in space-time around it, guided by Hinata's directions. "There," she called, pointing to coordinates invisible to normal perception. "The dimensional fabric is weakest at those junctions." One by one, the orbs struck their targets, reinforcing reality itself at its most vulnerable points. With each impact, the rift contracted further, the darkness beyond growing more frantic in its attempts to push through. Naruto maintained constant pressure, his power flowing outward in waves that realigned the very structure of existence around them. From her position against the column, Shinra watched in awe and terror. "What is he?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "He's Naruto," Hinata answered simply, her eyes ever leaving the battle unfolding before them. Just more so. The rift had shrunk to half its original size, the darkness beyond growing increasingly desperate. It lashed out with tendrils of void that dissolved anything they touched. But Naruto's transformed being stood firm against the assault. Each attack that struck him was absorbed, analyzed, and countered with precision. "You cannot have this world," he declared, gathering energy for a final push. "Return to the void between dimensions. Feed on the empty spaces. The realms of life are closed to you." With a gesture of cosmic finality, Naruto brought his hands together in a seal that existed in no shinobi teaching. Reality itself bent to his will as the rift collapsed inward, sealing completely with a thunderclap that shook the mountain to its foundations. The tendrils of darkness that had breached their world dissolved into nothingness, leaving only scorch marks on the ancient stone where they had touched. For a moment, silence reigned across the temple platform. Then Naruto turned, his composite form still radiating power beyond comprehension, to face Hinata and Shinra. "It's retreated," he confirmed, his voice still carrying those otherworldly harmonics. "But not defeated. It will look for other entry points, other weaknesses." Hinata approached cautiously, her evolved Byakugan studying his transformed state. "Can you revert back? This level of power consumption can't be sustainable." Naruto looked down at his hands, observing the cosmic energies flowing beneath his semi-translucent skin. "I'm not sure. The integration is more complete than I expected. The boundaries between myself and the entities have blurred." "Try," she encouraged, reaching out to take his transformed hand without fear. Find your center, the core of who you are. Quote, her touch created an anchor point, a connection to his humanity that the cosmic forces couldn't overshadow. Gradually, focusing on that connection, Naruto began to pull back the divine energies, compartmentalizing them once more within his consciousness. The spectral manifestations receded, the truth-seeking orbs diminished, and his physical appearance slowly returned to something closer to human, though the transformed eyes remained. When the process completed, he stumbled slightly, suddenly aware of the enormous energy expenditure. Hinata caught him, supporting his weight effortlessly. Thank you, he murmured, his voice his own again, though a subtle harmonic undertone remained. Always, she replied with a small smile, and in that moment Naruto realized how much she had always meant that word, through years of quiet support he had often overlooked. Their moment was interrupted by slow, deliberate applause. Shinra had regained her composue. Rian now regarded them with calculated interest. Impressive, she acknowledged, approaching cautiously. You've accomplished in minutes what our organization spent years working toward, direct communication with interdimensional entities. Your organization was being manipulated, Naruto countered, straightening as his strength returned. The being you thought was guiding you was the devourer itself, using you to weaken the barriers between worlds. Shinra's expression faltered. That's not possible. Our leaders communed with a being of pure enlightenment, a guide to evolutionary transcendence. It showed them what they wanted to see, Hinata explained, her transformed eyes studying Shinra intently. Your chakra patterns indicate you've been subtly influenced, not controlled, but nudged in certain directions. Suggestions planted in your subconscious. The revelation clearly disturbed Shinra, who backed away a step. No, our work was to elevate humanity beyond its limitations, to transcend the physical plane. And how many died during your experiments? Naruto asked quietly. How many test subjects were sacrificed to create your enhanced abilities? Shinra had no answer, her confidence crumbling as the implications sank in. Everything her organization had worked toward, every sacrifice made in the name of transcendence, had been in service to an entity that would have consumed their entire reality without hesitation. What happens now? She finally asked, genuine uncertainty replacing her former arrogance. Before Naruto could respond, the temple platform shuddered beneath them. Not an attack this time, but a resonance effect. The dimensional energies released during the confrontation had created ripples throughout reality, amplifying the distortions already in progress. Hinata activated her evolved Byakugan fully, scanning their surroundings. More rifts are forming, she reported grimly. All across the Fire Country, possibly beyond. That entity, he Devourer, is testing the barriers systematically now. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his enhanced senses outward. She was right. He could feel dozens of weak points forming in reality's fabric, each a potential entry point for the Devourer. Worse, he sensed other effects of the dimensional bleeding, strange energies leaking through, altering the fundamental laws of nature in localized areas. We need to return to Konoha, he decided, opening his eyes. Warn the Hokage, organize a response. If rifts are forming everywhere, people will be in danger. And what about her? Hinata nodded toward Shinra, who stood silently processing her shattered worldview. Naruto considered the Akatsuki member thoughtfully. Despite everything, he sensed no genuine malice in her, only misguided idealism. Manipulated by forces beyond her understanding. She comes with us, he decided. Her knowledge of the rifts and the enhanced Akatsuki could be valuable. And, he met Shinra's gaze directly, everyone deserves a chance to correct their mistakes. Something like gratitude flickered across Shinra's face before she composed herself. I won't resist. Whatever is happening, I want to understand the truth. With that settled, Naruto turned back to Hinata. Can you guide us to Konoha? I'd rather not risk another dimensional jump until I have better control. She nodded, but concern shadowed her expression. We should hurry. The dimensional distortions are accelerating. And, she hesitated, you should prepare yourself. Your appearance, your chakra signature, they've changed significantly. People may not recognize you immediately. Naruto hadn't considered that aspect. He'd been so focused on the immediate threat that the long-term implications of his transformation hadn't fully registered. How would the village react to what he'd become? Would they see him as Naruto Uzumaki, their fellow shinobi, or as something other, something to be feared? He pushed the concerns aside for now. The immediate priority was reaching Konoha and organizing a response to the dimensional crisis. His personal challenges would have to wait. "Let's move," he said, determination hardening his voice. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they descended from the Temple Mountain into a world increasingly affected by dimensional instabilities, none of them noticed the small, shimmering tear in reality that formed briefly at the edge of the platform behind them. Through it, for just a moment, a single eye observed their departure, an eye filled with ancient malice and patient hunger. The god of carnage had emerged, just as plans centuries in the making had intended. The pieces were in motion, the board set for a game of cosmic consequences. And somewhere beyond normal perception, powers even greater than those Naruto now commanded watched with interest to see what choices he would make. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Echoes of Divinity. Dawn painted Konoha's eastern sky fractured hues that shouldn't exist in nature, crimson bleeding into ultraviolet, cerulean fracturing into spectrums visible only to evolved eyes. Naruto observed the dimensional distortions in the atmosphere with growing concern as they approached the village gates. The rifts were subtle here, not yet visible to ordinary perception, but their effects manifested in increasingly alarming ways. The boundary layer is thinning faster than I anticipated, Hinata murmured, her transformed Byakugan tracking invisible currents. 17 distinct dimensional anomalies within the village perimeter alone. Shinra, hands bound with specialized seals Naruto had created, studied the distorted sunrise with clinical detachment. The convergence pattern follows theoretical models. Dimensional bleeding. G begins with light spectrum alterations, progresses to localized physics variations, then culminates in full manifestation breaches. Naruto felt the entities within him stir at her assessment. The Arceus aspect resonated with recognition. This pattern had played out across countless realities before. Nothing about this situation was unprecedented except, perhaps, the unique convergence of powers within Naruto himself. "We need to move quickly," he decided, adjusting the transformation technique he'd applied to partially mask his most obvious changes. Though he couldn't completely hide the dimensional energies coursing beneath his skin, he'd managed to dull his eyes to a more natural blue with subtle ripple patterns visible only up close. Tsunade needs to understand what we're facing before panic spreads. The village gates loomed ahead, the eternal guards Kotetsu and Izumo already visible at their posts. Something was different about them, though, a newfound alertness, hands hovering near weapons. Eyes scanning the tree line with unusual intensity. "They're on high alert," Hinata observed. Word of the dimensional disturbances must have reached the village already. As they approached, Kotetsu stepped forward. Hand raised. "Identify yourselves." His voice carried uncharacteristic tension. "Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga, returning from reconnaissance with a prisoner," Naruto replied, keeping his tone measured despite the urgency pressing against his thoughts. Both guards stiffened, exchanging glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken concern. "Uzumaki." Izumo studied him with narrowed eyes. "Prove it." Naruto blinked, momentarily taken aback by the request. Then understanding dawned. His changed appearance, combined with the dimensional disturbances, had raised their suspicions to unprecedented levels. "The first time you caught me painting the Hokage monument," he said, allowing a hint of his old mischievous grin, "you promised not to report me if I help. Reorganize the mission scrolls in the record room. We ended up accidentally releasing that colony of archive rats that had been living behind the historical section." Tension visibly drained from Kotetsu's shoulders. "It is you. But what happened?" His question died as his gaze shifted to Hinata, whose transformed eyes were impossible to disguise. "Both of you look. We need to see the Hokage immediately," Naruto cut in. "The situation is more serious than anyone realizes." Izumo nodded toward their prisoner. "And her, Akatsuki," Hinata explained, but with critical information about the dimensional anomalies. The mention of dimensional anomalies triggered an immediate reaction. Kotetsu's expression darkened as he signaled to a nearby Anbu observer Naruto hadn't noticed until that moment. "Escort them directly to the Hokage. Priority clearance." The masked Anbu appeared beside them with unsettling silence. Something about their chakra signature felt oddly familiar to Naruto. Though he couldn't place it, his new senses detected subtle distortions even in people he knew well. This way, the Anbu directed, voice deliberately modulated to reveal nothing of their identity. The village is under partial lockdown protocols. Stay close. As they entered Konoha, the changes were immediately apparent. Streets normally bustling with morning activity were eerily subdued. Civilian movement was restricted to essential purposes, with shinobi patrols visible at every intersection. The atmosphere hummed with contained anxiety, a village preparing for unknown threats. But most disturbing were the subtle dimensional anomalies visible to Naruto's transformed perception. A fruit stand where apples aged and rotted at accelerated rates while pears beside them remained perfectly preserved. A street corner where gravity seemed slightly stronger, causing people to unconsciously lean to compensate. A playground where children's shadows occasionally moved independently of their owners, stretching toward invisible light sources. They've been appearing for 3 days now, the Anbu informed them, noting Naruto's attention to the anomalies. Small at first, easily dismissed as genjutsu or pranksters. But they're growing more pronounced by the hour. Any casualties? Naruto asked, feeling responsibility settle heavily across his shoulders. The connection between his TRANS formation and the accelerating convergence was undeniable. 3 missing civilians near the northern district, came the clipped response. A genin team reporting unusual chakra exhaustion after investigating a disturbance. Nothing fatal yet. The unspoken implication hung between them like a blade. They passed the hospital, where a crowd had gathered outside the main entrance. Medical staff worked to maintain order while civilians demanded treatment for symptoms that defied conventional diagnosis: sensory hallucinations, temporary organ displacement, memories of events that never occurred. Dimensional bleed effects, Shinra murmured, breaking her silence. Early-stage cognitive dissonance as human perception attempts to reconcile conflicting realities. Will they recover? Hinata asked, compassion overriding her wariness of their prisoner. Shinra's clinical detachment faltered. If the rifts are sealed quickly enough, yes. If not, she left the alternative unspoken. As they continued toward the Hokage Tower, which stood like a bastion of normality amid the growing chaos. Yet even here, Naruto could perceive the dimensional thinning, subtle distortions in the building's geometry. Angles that defied Euclidean mathematics, shadows that fell contrary to the sun's position. The tower's interior buzzed with controlled urgency. Messengers darted between departments. Mission scrolls exchanged hands with unusual frequency, and the typical bureaucratic languor had been replaced by wartime efficiency. They were escorted directly to Tsunade's office, bypassing the USU Al checkpoints with their Anbu guide's authorization. When the door opened, the scene inside confirmed the gravity of the situation. Tsunade stood behind her desk, which was covered with maps marked with clustering red dots, dimensional anomaly locations, Naruto realized. Shizune coordinated with multiple messenger hawks by the window, while Shikamaru Nara and Neji Hyuga huddled over what appeared to be sensor readings and incident reports. All eyes turned as they entered, conversation dying instantly. Naruto. Tsunade's voice carried equal measures of relief and alarm as she took in his altered appearance. Her gaze shifted to Hinata, then locked onto their prisoner with sharp focus. Report. Now. Before Naruto could begin, Neji stepped forward, his own Byakugan activating as he stared at his cousin with undisguised shock. Hinata, your eyes. His voice faltered, a rare break in his composure. What happened to your Byakugan? Evolution, she replied simply, meeting his gaze. Without the hesitation that had once characterized her interactions with him. Dimensional exposure accelerated latent potential. Neji looked ready to pursue the matter further, but Tsunade cut him off with a sharp gesture. We'll address personal transformations later. Naruto, explain the prisoner and your connection to these anomalies. My patience is exceptionally thin right now. Naruto nodded, gathering his thoughts. The explanation needed to be comprehensive yet efficient. Lives depended on their response time. The dimensional rifts are intentional, he began, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. The Akatsuki, or what remains of it, has been experimenting with interdimensional technologies far beyond conventional chakra applications. Their actions weakened the barriers between our reality and others, creating entry points for something they call the Great Devourer, an entity that consumes entire dimensions. Shikamaru's expression sharpened with characteristic intensity. You're saying these anomalies are an invasion attempt. Troublesome doesn't begin to cover it. Not just an attempt, Naruto corrected. The initial breaches have already begun. I sealed one major rift personally. But dozens more are forming. The entity is probing our dimensional boundaries systematically, looking for weaknesses. Tsunade's knuckles widened as she gripped her desk. And your transformation? Hinata's eyes. Here, Naruto hesitated. The full truth about the cosmic entities now sharing his consciousness would sound insane, even given the crisis they faced. He opted for a streamlined explanation. The Akatsuki attempted to use an experimental seal on me to harvest the Nine Tails chakra for their dimensional experiments. Instead, it triggered something else, a converge. NCE of powers that were apparently dormant within me. I've gained abilities that can counteract the rifts, seal them permanently. What powers? Tsunade pressed, her medical instincts clearly detecting the omissions in his account. Naruto exchanged glances with Hinata, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. I've become a vessel for 3 cosmic entities, he stated directly, knowing how it would sound. Kaguya Otsutsuki's primal chakra, the Shinigami's death essence, and a creation deity called Arceus. Their combined powers allow me to manipulate dimensional boundaries, among other abilities. The silence that followed was deafening. Shizune nearly dropped the scroll she'd been holding, while Shikamaru's typically lazy posture straightened with alarm. Even Neji, usually unflappable, took an unconscious step backward. Tsunade's expression, however, remained carefully neutral, the practiced poker face of a leader who couldn't afford to show fear. Demonstrate, she commanded simply. Naruto nodded, releasing the transformation technique that had partially masked his changed appearance. His eyes returned to their new state, right eye displaying the modified Rinnegan pattern. Left eye showing the cosmic darkness with pinpoint stars. The energy beneath his skin became visible, flowing in patterns that defied conventional chakra networks. Raising his hand, he created a SM. All sphere of swirling energy unlike anything they'd seen before, not a Rasengan, but a miniature representation of dimensional convergence itself. Within it, they could glimpse fragments of other realities, possibilities that existed parallel to their own. This is merely a demonstration, he explained, maintaining perfect control of the volatile energies. At full capacity, I can seal the rifts permanently by reinforcing reality itself at critical junctures. The sphere collapsed inward, disappearing without a trace. Naruto let his appearance return to its more humanoid state, though he didn't completely mask the changes anymore. Tsunade exhaled slowly, decades of experience helping her process the impossible. And the prisoner, how does she factor into this? Shinra stepped forward, her scientific demeanor reasserting itself despite her bound hands. My name is Shinra. I was chief researcher for the Dimensional Studies Division of the reformed Akatsuki. Everything he's told you is accurate, though his understanding of the technologies involved is limited. You created these rifts, Neji stated, the accusation clear in his voice. We expanded pre-existing weaknesses in dimensional fabric, Shinra corrected. Natural thin points have always existed throughout your world. We merely exploited them. Under the influence of the entity now trying to consume our reality, Hinata added pointedly. Tsunade's gaze hardened as she studied their prisoner. And now you're cooperating because I was deceived, Shinra admitted, real emotion breaking through her clinical facade. The being guiding our research presented itself as a benefactor, an evolutionary catalyst. I believed we were advancing humanity's potential. I didn't understand we were merely preparing our world for consumption. Shikamaru, who had been silently analyzing everything, finally spoke. If what you're saying is true, standard military response is meaningless against these dimensional threats. We need a specialized approach. Precisely, Naruto agreed. Conventional techniques can't affect the rifts, they exist partially outside our reality. My abilities, and to some extent Hinata's evolved perception, represent our best defense. You're suggesting we place the entire village's safety in the hands of a 16-year-old who's suddenly housing 3 cosmic entities? Tsunade challenged, though her tone suggested she already recognized the lack of alternatives. Not just the village, Naruto corrected quietly. If these rifts continue spreading, the entire world is at risk. And yes, I'm aware of how it sounds. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room as the full implications sank in. Naruto understood their hesitation. He was asking for extraordinary trust, based on an explanation that strained credibility, despite the evidence before their eyes. The moment was interrupted by a frantic knock at the door. Without waiting for permission, a Jonin burst into the office. His uniform singed and face streaked with dirt. "Hokage-sama, a major anomaly has formed in the Western District. He faltered, struggling to find adequate words. It's consuming buildings, people, anything that comes near it." Tsunade snapped into action. Casualties. At least 7 confirmed, dozens injured in the panic. It's expanding rapidly. Evacuation status underway, but civilians are scattered throughout the area. We don't have enough personnel to. I conceal it, Naruto interjected, already moving toward the door. But I need to act quickly, before it stabilizes fully. Tsunade hesitated only briefly before nodding. Shikamaru, coordinate evacuation with available teams. Neji, use your Byakugan to locate civilians in the affected area. Shizune, prepare the hospital for dimensional exposure cases. Her gaze locked with Naruto's. Seal that rift, whatever it takes. The unspoken permission to use his full abilities didn't escape his notice. Naruto turned to Hinata. I'll need your perception to identify the dimensional weak points. She nodded without hesitation. I'm ready. What about me? Shinra asked, raising her bound hands. Tsunade's expression hardened. You're staying here under Anbu guard until we verify your information. With respect, Hokage-sama, Hinata interjected with uncharacteristic boldness, her knowledge the rifts could prove valuable on site. She understands the technological aspects better than either of us. A tense silence followed as Tsunade weighed the risks. Finally, she signaled to the Anbu who had escorted them. She goes with them, but under your constant supervision. If she attempts anything suspicious, terminate her immediately. Shinra paled slightly but nodded her acceptance of the terms. Without further delay, they departed for the Western District, moving across rooftops at maximum speed. As they traveled, Naruto felt the dimensional distortions intensifying, reality itself becoming increasingly malleable around them. Ordinary shinobi they passed gave them wide berth, unnerved by the visible energies emanating from his partially transformed state. The evacuation teams are ahead, Hinata reported, her evolved Byakugan scanning far beyond normal range. The rift has consumed approximately 1 city block already and is expanding exponentially. When they crested the final rooftop, the scale of the disaster became apparent. A swirling vortex of darkness hung suspended in the air where several buildings had once stood, its edges rippling with colors that hurt the human eye to observe. Matter at its periphery warped and stretched before being pulled inward, disappearing into the void. The air itself seemed to scream with the wrongness of what was occurring. Evacuation teams worked desperately to clear the surrounding areas, shinobi carrying civilians who had frozen in terror at the sight of the cosmic anomaly. Medical teams treated the injured, many of Whom exhibited strange symptoms, limbs temporarily phasing out of reality, internal organs rearranging, consciousness splitting between multiple potential states. Naruto assessed the situation quickly. This isn't just a passive rift. It's an intentional incursion point. The devourer is actively pushing through. Shinra nodded grimly. Classic Stage 3 manifestation. The entity has established a stable conduit and is beginning conversion of local matter into compatible energy states. Can you seal it? The Anbu guard asked, hand resting on a sword hilt that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, specialized equipment. Naruto realized, designed for paranormal threats. Yes, but not conventionally. Naruto's eyes shifted fully to their transformed state as he allowed more of the cosmic powers to surface. I need to access higher energy states to counteract the dimensional torque. What does that mean for everyone in the vicinity? Neji demanded, having just arrived with Shikamaru to coordinate the evacuation. It means clear the area completely, Naruto instructed, his voice taking on the harmonic qualities that indicated deeper communion with the entities within. What I'm about to do will have side effects on conventional reality. Shikamaru immediately grasped the implications. All teams, minimum safe distance of 500 meters. Priority evacuation of the remaining civilians within that radius. Quote, as the evacuation perimeter expanded, Naruto turned to Hinata. I need you to locate the dimensional anchors, the points where the rift is secured to our reality. Her evolved Byakugan activated fully, the concentric silver circles rotating as she perceived layers of reality invisible to others. 3 primary anchor points, she reported after several seconds of intense focus. 1 at the original breach site, 2 others extending along metaphysical ley lines beneath the village. The rift is establishing a triangulation grid, Shinra explained, professional interest momentarily overriding her situation. Classic dimensional colonization pattern. Once stabilized, secondary rifts will form at each vertex, creating a cascading failure of local reality. Not if I seal it first, Naruto countered, beginning to channel the combined powers of his cosmic entities. His transformation progressed beyond the partial state he'd maintained previously, physical form shifting toward the composite being he'd become at the temple. Spectral manifestations of Kaguya, the Shinigami, and Arceus began to emerge from his body, their forms overlapping with his own. The truth-seeking orbs materialized around him, each containing swirling galaxies of potential. Civilians still within sight froze in terror at his metamorphosis, many falling to their knees. In instinctive response to the divine energies now radiating from his form. Even experienced shinobi backed away, fundamental survival instincts warning them that what stood before them transcended human comprehension. Naruto. Hinata's voice alone remained steady, familiar enough with his transformed state to maintain her composure. The anchors are fluctuating. The entity is adapting to our presence. It senses my intention, he confirmed, his voice carrying those otherworldly harmonics. It recognizes these powers. Without further hesitation, Naruto launched himself directly toward the swirling vortex. His transformed body leaving a trail of dimensional echoes behind him. As he approached the rift's perimeter, space-time itself bent around his movements, reality struggling to accommodate the impossible convergence of powers he represented. The rift reacted immediately to his proximity, the swirling darkness at its center forming something resembling an enormous eye that focused on him with malevolent awareness. Tendrils of void extended outward with predatory intent, seeking to ensnare him. Naruto countered with precise application of Kaguya's primal chakra, creating a barrier of absolute reality that the void couldn't penetrate. The resulting collision sent shockwaves through the surrounding area, shattering windows and cracking stone structures hundreds of meters away. The primary anchor point is directly beneath the eye manifestation. Hinata called out, her evolved perception tracking the invisible foundations of the dimensional intrusion. Naruto acknowledged with a slight nod, directing one of his truth-seeking orbs toward the specified coordinates. The sphere passed through conventional matter as if it didn't exist, targeting the metaphysical structure underlying the physical world. Upon contact, the orb expanded explosively, reinforcing reality itself against the interdimensional intrusion. The rift shuddered, the eye manifestation blinking idly in what appeared to be pain or surprise. The tendrils retracted momentarily before lashing out with renewed ferocity. Secondary anchors are compensating, Shinra warned, her scientific expert. Eyes proving valuable despite her prisoner status. It's rerouting dimensional pressure to maintain stability. Hinata. Coordinates. Naruto commanded, maintaining his position against the increasing pressure from the rift. She rattled off precise metaphysical locations, which Naruto targeted with additional truth-seeking orbs. Each impact created another shockwave, each disrupting the rift's stability further. But the entity behind it was adapting with frightening speed, shifting its approach with every counterattack. It's learning from each interaction, Naruto realized aloud. I need to end this quickly. Drawing deeper on the combined powers, particularly the Arceus aspect's authority over fundamental creation, Naruto began formulating a more permanent solution. Rather than merely attacking the anchor points, he would rewrite the dimensional parameters of the affected area, making it fundamentally incompatible with the Devourer's intrusion. The spectral manifestation of Arceus grew more prominent as Naruto channeled this specific aspect, the golden wheel around its form spinning with increasing velocity. Reality around him began to blur as fundamental constants, gravity, time flow. Even the basic laws of physics became malleable under his influence. From the evacuation perimeter, The observing shinobi watched in awe and terror as Naruto's transformed being began to gl out with intensity that defied visual processing. His form seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, afterimages trailing seconds behind his actual movements, precognitive echoes appearing briefly before actions occurred. What's happening to him? Neji demanded, his standard Byakugan struggling to interpret what it perceived. He's rewriting local reality, Shinra explained, scientific detachment failing to mask her own astonishment. Establishing new dimensional constants that will reject the intrusion automatically. The process reached its crescendo as Naruto brought his hands together in that same seal that existed in no shinobi teaching, a configuration that spoke directly to the fundamental structure of existence itself. Light and darkness inverted around him momentarily, sound became color, gravity became time. As reality reconfigured to his specifications. With a sound like the universe taking a breath, the rift began to collapse inward. The eye manifestation within in what could only be described as panic, tendrils flailing desperately for purchase that no longer existed. The swirling vortex contracted, dimensional energies folding back upon themselves as the modified laws of physics Naruto had established rejected their very existence. In a final, defiant surge, the entity behind the rift attempted direct communication, projecting concepts rather than RDS directly into Naruto's consciousness. You cannot seal all. We are infinite. Hunger eternal. Naruto responded with equal directness, the combined voices of himself and the three entities speaking as one. This realm is protected. Feed elsewhere. The last of the darkness imploded with a thunderclap that momentarily deafened everyone within a kilometer radius. Where the rift had been, normal reality reasserted itself, though not quite as it had been before. The affected area now shimmered with subtle iridescence, ordinary matter infused with traces of Naruto's dimensional reinforcement. Buildings that had been partially consumed reappeared, reconstructed by the reality-affirming energies he had released. People who had been caught in the initial manifestation materialized where they had stood. Appearing dazed but largely unharmed, their existences reclaimed from the between space where the rift had sent them. As the spectacular energies dissipated, Naruto allowed his form to revert to a more humanoid state. Though the transformation had progressed too far for him to appear completely normal anymore. His skin retained that semi-translucent quality, cosmic energies visibly flowing beneath the surface. His transformed eyes remained, impossible to disguise after channeling so much power. Hinata was immediately at his side, supporting him as the energy expenditure took its toll. Are you all right? It's getting harder to come back, he admitted quietly, so only she could hear. The boundaries between myself and them are becoming increasingly academic. Before she could respond, they were surrounded by shinobi and civilians alike, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, gratitude, and uncertainty. News of what had happened was spreading rapidly through the gathered crowd, how Naruto Uzumaki, the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, had transformed into something beyond human understanding to save them. Some dropped to their knees in instinctive genuflection. Others backed away, fundamental survival instincts warning them that what stood before them was not entirely of their world anymore. A few approached hesitantly, offering stammered thanks for loved ones who had been restored from the rift's consumption. Give him space, Shikamaru ordered, taking command of the increasingly chaotic situation. Medical team, check the recovered civilians. Engineering Corps, SS structural integrity of the restored buildings. As some semblance of order was established, Naruto became aware of someone watching him with unusual intensity. Turning, he found himself meeting he gaze of a woman he didn't recognize standing at the edge of the crowd. Unlike those around her, she showed neither fear nor awe, only profound interest. She was striking in appearance, with features that seemed not quite aligned with typical Fire Country ethnicity. Her hair fell in waves of deep crimson, adorned with ornamental pins bearing sun symbols. Traditional priestess robes in white and gold wrapped her form, though modified for ease of movement. Most distinctive were her eyes, amber with concentric rings of gold that seemed to capture and reflect light in unnatural ways. When their gazes met, she bowed slightly, not in subjugation but acknowledgement, one power recognizing another. Before Naruto could approach or inquire about her identity, she turned and disappeared into the dispersing crowd with preternatural grace. "Who was that?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Amaterasu Kunito Kodachi," Shinra answered unexpectedly, having observed the exchange. "High Priestess of the Primordial Sun Temple from the Land of Ancestors. My organization had her under observation for years. Her connection to ancient dimensional knowledge made her interesting to us." "What is she doing in Konoha?" Hinata asked, her evolved Byakugan tracking the woman's retreating form until she passed beyond even its enhanced range. "I imagine the same thing that's drawing other power sensitives to this location," Shinra replied. "The dimensional convergence is acting like a beacon to those attuned to such energies. She won't be the last to arrive." Before they could discuss the matter further, an Anbu messenger appeared before them. "Uzumaki-san, Hyuga-san. The Hokage requests your immediate return. A council has been convened to address the crisis." Naruto nodded, mentally preparing himself for the political complications that would inevitably follow. His transformation and abilities would raise questions of power, authority, and control that extended far beyond Konoha's borders. Once word spread, and it would spread quickly, the other hidden villages would demand explanations, assurances, perhaps even demonstrations. "We're coming," he confirmed, starting toward the Hokage Tower with Hinata and their Anbu escorted prisoner in tow. As they traveled, Naruto became increasingly aware of the whispers and stares that followed them. Word of what had happened was already racing through the village, growing more fantastical with each retelling. Some called him hero, others savior, a few even used the word God with hushed reverence. The attention unsettled him, far more than the dimensional rifts had. He'd wanted acknowledgement his entire life, but not like this, not as something other than human. The distance he felt growing between himself and ordinary Peo pained him more than any physical wound could have. "They're afraid," he noted quietly to Hinata as they passed a group of civilians who visibly flinched away from them. "They fear what they don't understand," she replied, her newfound confidence allowing her to speak truths she might once have softened. "And you've become something beyond their understanding. I don't want to be feared. I never wanted that." "Then show them there's still humanity in you," she suggested, her transformed eyes meeting his with unflinching directness. "Power doesn't have to create distance unless you allow it to." Her words carried wisdom beyond her years, another sign of how her own evolution had changed her. The shy, hesitant Hinata was gone, replaced by someone who spoke her mind with quiet conviction. Before he could respond, they arrived at the Hokage Tower to find it bustling with even greater activity than before. Representatives from various village departments crowded the corridors, clan leaders conferred in hushed tones. And Anbu guards had doubled at every entrance. They were escorted directly to the council chamber rather than Tsunade's office, a space reserved for the most serious village deliberations. Inside, they found not only the Hokage and her advisors, but also all major clan heads, the Anbu commander, and several specialized jonin with expertise in sealing techniques and dimensional anomalies. All conversation ceased as they entered, dozens of eyes focusing on Naruto's transformed appearance with varying degrees of concern, curiosity, and calculation. Tsunade stood at the head of the long table, her expression grave. "The Western District Rift has been contained," she announced, forestalling questions. Thanks to Naruto's intervention, casualties were minimum. And structural damage has largely been reversed. Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders, some relieved, others skeptical. Homura Mitokado, one of the village elders, spoke first. "While we appreciate the assistance provided, we must address the central issue. Uzumaki-san appears to have undergone a transformation that raises significant questions about control, safety, and authority." Several clan heads nodded in agreement. Though Naruto noted Hiashi Hyuga remained carefully neutral, his eyes occasionally darting to his daughter's transformed Byakugan with barely concealed concern. "Let's be direct," Tsunade countered, her patience visibly thin. "We're facing a crisis unlike anything in recorded history. Conventional approaches are useless against these rifts. Naruto's new abilities represent our best defense, possibly our only defense." "At what cost?" Kaharu Udatane, the other elder, challenged. "We've all heard reports of what happened in the Western District. Witnesses describe abilities that defy natural law, reality manipulation, matter reconstruction, temporal distortion. Such power cannot go unregulated. Danzo Shimura, seated in the shadows as always, finally spoke. The question isn't whether we need these abilities, clearly, we do. The question is how they should be deployed, under whose authority, and with what safeguards. The political maneuvering was transparent to Naruto. Danzo saw his transformation as both threat and opportunity, a power to be controlled and utilized for his vision of Konoha's future. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened again, admitting an unexpected figure, the red-haired priestess Naruto had noticed earlier, Amaterasu Kunitokodachi. She entered without invitation or announcement, her bearing regal and unapologetic. "Forgive my intrusion," she stated, though her tone suggested she felt no need for forgiveness. "But your deliberations concern matters beyond village politics. This is a closed council meeting," Homura objected. "By what authority do you enter?" Amaterasu smiled thinly, producing an ancient-looking scroll bearing seals of office that even the elders recognized with visible shock. "By authority of the primordial Sun Temple, as established in the founding treaties when the hidden village system was created." Her amber gold eyes swept the room before settling on Naruto with penetrating intensity. "Your dimensional crisis extends far beyond Konoha's borders. The convergence has awakened dormant nexus points throughout the elemental nations." Tsunade studied the newcomer with guarded interest. "What do you know about these dimensional rifts?" "More than anyone here, save perhaps him," Amaterasu replied, nodding toward Naruto. "My order has monitored dimensional boundaries for centuries. What you're experiencing now was prophesied in our oldest texts, the time of thinning veils, when the devourer would seek entry to our reality." Skepticism showed on many faces, but Naruto felt the cosmic entities within him stir with recognition, particularly the Kaguya aspect, which seemed to hold fragmented memories of Amaterasu's temple and its origins. "If you have relevant information, share it," Danzo instructed, his lone visible eye narrowing with suspicion. Without mystical embellishment, if possible. If the priestess took offense at his tone, she showed no sign. Instead, she placed both palms flat on the council table. Chakra unlike anything most present had encountered before flowed from her hands, conjuring a three-dimensional projection of the entire continent above the table's surface. "Dimensional thin points have always existed throughout our world," she explained as glowing red markers appeared across the projection. "Natural weaknesses in the fabric of reality. Most dormant or self-regulating. My order was established to monitor these points, maintain ancient seals where necessary, and prepare for the prophesied convergence." The projection shifted, showing new points illuminating in rapid succession, dozens, then hundreds of markers flashing into existence across the continent. 3 days ago, these dormant points began activating simultaneously. The pattern matches exactly what our texts describe as the prelude to dimensional collapse. "Caused by what?" Shikaku Nara, Shikamaru's father, asked with characteristic directness. "By him," Amaterasu stated, pointing directly at Naruto, "or more precisely, by what he contains. The convergence of 3 cosmic entities within a human vessel has created a resonance effect that's stabilizing dimensional boundaries throughout our world." All eyes turned to Naruto, many hardening with suspicion or accusation. "I didn't ask for this," he stated evenly, meeting their gazes without flinching. "But I accept responsibility for addressing it. The vessel is not at fault," Amaterasu clarified, surprising him with her defense. "The Akatsuki's dimensional experiments accelerated what would have eventually occurred naturally. They merely hastened the inevitable." "That doesn't solve our immediate problem," Tsunade interjected, redirecting the conversation to practical matters. "These rifts are appearing throughout the village, throughout the entire continent by your account. We need a coordinated response." "Agreed," the priestess nodded. "Which is why I propose an alliance between my order and Konoha. Centered around him." She gestured toward Naruto again. "The god of carnage must be trained to control and direct his powers effectively. My temple possesses knowledge that can assist this process." Naruto started at the title, the same one the entities within him had used. "You know that name." "How?" Amaterasu's expression softened slightly. "As I said, these events were prophesied. The emergence of a vessel containing primal creation, death essence, and cosmic authority, the 3 pillars of existence unified in human form. The god of carnage, Destroyer who preserves. Who ends what threatens all endings. Her words sent an uncomfortable ripple through the council chamber. Several clan heads exchanged troubled glances, while the elders' expressions darkened with clear disapproval. Theological interpretations aside, Danzo cut in, the practical matter remains. How do we contain these rifts? We don't just contain them, Naruto stated, finding his voice again. We need to trace them to their source. The entity behind these incursions, the Devourer, is coordinating its attacks. Each rift I seal makes the others more determined. We need to find the dimensional boundary is weakest and address the root cause. Amaterasu nodded approvingly. The vessel shows wisdom. Treating symptoms while ignoring the disease will only prolong our suffering. And where is this root cause? Hiashi Hyuga finally spoke, his gaze moving between Naruto and his daughter with careful calculation. Where is the boundary weakest? The priestess turned to Naruto expectantly, clearly believing he should know the answer. And to his surprise, he did, the knowledge rising from the combined awareness of the entities within him. The land of ancestors, he stated, meeting Amaterasu's gaze directly. Specifically, a location your people call the Genesis Crater. It's where Kaguya Otsutsuki first arrived in our world, creating the original dimensional tear that never fully healed. The priestess's eyes widened slightly, whether in surprise at his knowledge or something else, Naruto couldn't tell. Correct. The Genesis Crater has been under my order's protection for centuries. Recent reports indicate unprecedented activity there. Then that's where I need to go, Naruto decided, his tone leaving little room for debate. Seal the source, and the secondary rifts will be easier to manage. Out of the question, Kaharu objected immediately. Sending our Jinchuriki, especially in his current state, outside village borders during a crisis violates every security protocol we have. With respect, Hinata interjected, speaking for the first time since entering the council chamber, conventional protocols are meaningless against dimensional threats. Naruto's abilities are our best defense, and they should be deployed where they'll have maximum effect. Her father stared at her with barely concealed shock. The daughter who had always been hesitant to speak in family meetings was now addressing the full council with unwavering confidence. Tsunade studied both Naruto and Hinata thoughtfully before turning to Amaterasu. How far is this Genesis Crater from Konoha? Approximately 3 days' travel at shinobi speed, the priestess replied. Though with his abilities, she nodded toward Naruto, potentially much faster. The Hokage considered this information, clearly weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Finally, she came to a decision. Naruto will lead a specialized team to investigate the Genesis Crater and address the dimensional weakness at its source. Hinata Hyuga will accompany him, along with, she paused, scanning the room before continuing, Shikamaru Nara for strategic planning, and our Anbu operative codenamed Lynx for security. The masked Anbu Naruto had noticed earlier inclined their heads slightly, accepting the assignment. Something about their chakra signature still nagged at Naruto's enhanced senses, familiar yet altered. As though he should recognize it but couldn't quite place it. I will also accompany them, Amaterasu stated, not asking permission but simply informing them of her intention. My knowledge of the crater and its properties will be essential. As will I, Shinra added unexpectedly from her position near the wall, where she'd been observing silently. My research on dimensional stabilization techniques could prove valuable. You're a prisoner, Danzo reminded her coldly. Not a consultant. A prisoner with specialized knowledge you desperately need, she countered. I've seen what happens when dimensional barriers collapse completely. If you want to prevent that outcome, you need every advantage available. Tsunade's expression suggested she found the idea distasteful but couldn't refute the logic. She goes, but under constant Anbu supervision with specialized restraints to prevent chakra usage. With the team composition settled, the council turned to logistics, equipment, communications, contingency plans if additional major rifts formed during their absence. Throughout the discussion, Naruto remained acutely aware of the subtle dynamics at play, the power shifts, the political calculations, the fear carefully masked behind professional concern. His transformation had altered more than his physical form, it had changed his place in the village's hierarchy. No longer viewed as simply a Jinchuriki to be managed, he had become something both more valuable and more concerning to Konoha's leadership, a potential savior whose power rise. Ed uncomfortable questions about authority and control. When the council finally concluded, Tsunade held Naruto back as the others filed out. Once they were alone save for Shizune, her official demeanor softened slightly. "How are you really handling this?" she asked, genuine concern replacing the clinical detachment she'd maintained during the council meeting. "And don't give me the confident front you showed them. I need to know what's actually happening to you." Naruto appreciated her directness. "It's complicated. The entities within me are becoming less distinct, more integrated with my consciousness. Their knowledge, their perspectives are bleeding into mine. I'm still me, but more than me at the same time." "Is it painful?" Her medical training emerged in the precision of the question. "Not physically," he admitted, "but existentially, yes. I'm becoming something I don't fully understand, something beyond human. Part of me welcomes the power it brings, the ability to protect others. Another part fears what I might lose in the process." Tsunade nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Your humanity." "Exactly." She considered him thoughtfully before speaking again. "Why? Our mother once told me something about being a Jinchuriki that might apply here. She said the secret was to fill yourself so completely with love that no other power, no matter how vast, could ever define you entirely." The mention of his mother caught Naruto off guard. Tsunade rarely spoke of her connections to his parents. "You think that applies to cosmic entities too?" he asked, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his transformed eyes. "I think it applies to anything that threatens to overwhelm who you essentially are," she replied seriously. "Fill yourself with connections to others, with the things that make you human. Don't let power, even power used for good, become the only thing that matters." The wisdom in her words resonated with something fundamental in Naruto's core, he part of him that had always valued bonds above all else. "I'll remember that," he promised. "Though it's getting harder for people to see me as just me." "Then surround yourself with those who still can," she advised, glancing meaningfully toward the corridor where Hinata waited. "Starting with her." Before he could respond, Tsunade straightened, her professional demeanor returning. "Your team leaves at dawn. I suggest you prepare thoroughly. We have no idea what you'll encounter at the Genesis crater." Naruto nodded, recognizing the dismissal. As he turned to leave, she added one final thought. "Whatever you're becoming, Naruto, remember what grounds you. Power without purpose leads to paths I've seen too many shinobi follow to their destruction." "I will," he assured her, the promise as much to himself as to her. Outside the council chamber, Hinata waited with Shikamaru, who had apparently been briefed on his inclusion in the mission. The Nara heir looked as unenthusiastic as ever, though Naruto detected genuine concern beneath his typically bored expression. "So we're heading to the birthplace of chakra to plug a dimensional leak that threatens to destroy reality," Shikamaru summarized with characteristic dry wit. "And here I thought escort missions were troublesome." Despite everything, Naruto found himself smiling. Shikamaru's familiar attitude provided a welcome anchor to normality. "Think of it as a chance to test that strategic mind of yours against cosmic threats." "Hard pass," Shikamaru muttered, though a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. "But sync declining means potentially watching reality collapse. I suppose I'm in." The Anbu operative links approached, their masked face revealing nothing of their thoughts. "We should discuss equipment requirements. Standard gear will be insufficient for dimensional anomalies." "Agreed," Naruto nodded. "We'll need specialized tools for monitoring dimensional stability, communication that works across distorted space-time, and protection against reality fluctuations." "I can provide several of those items," Amaterasu interjected, joining their group with silent grace. "My temple maintains artifacts specifically designed for dimensional boundary work." Naruto studied the priestess with renewed interest. She carried herself with absolute certainty, yet unlike many authority figures he'd encountered, her confidence didn't manifest as arrogance. There was something almost familiar about her energy signature, a resonance with the Kaguya aspect within him that suggested ancient connections. "Your temple," he began carefully. "It has direct ties to Kaguya Otsutsuki, doesn't it?" Amaterasu's amber gold eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise he'd seen her display. "Yes," she confirmed after a moment's hesitation. "My order was established by those who understood her true nature, not merely as the monster of legend but as a cosmic force whose arrival forever changed our world's dimensional alignment. You worship her? Shikamaru asked, skepticism evident. We acknowledge her, the priestess corrected. Worship implies reverence without understanding. We study what she was, what she became, and the forces she unleashed upon our reality. Her gaze returned to Naruto. Just as we must now study you. The directness of her statement might have offended him once. Now, imply nodded in acceptance of her intent. Fair enough. I could use understanding myself better. Their planning session continued, each contributing expertise to the mission preparations. Shinra offered insights into the Akatsuki's dimensional research, while Hinata's evolved Byakugan provided unique perspectives on how to track and analyze the rifts they would encounter. Shikamaru quickly absorbed the complex interdimensional concepts, adapting traditional shinobi tactics to account for reality distortions. Throughout the discussion, Naruto found himself increasingly aware of Amaterasu's tension, not hostile but intensely analytical, as though cataloging every word, every gesture, every fluctuation in the cosmic energies visible beneath his skin. Her interest seemed professional yet personal simultaneously, clinical yet somehow intimate in its focus. When their planning concluded and the group dispersed to prepare for dawn departure, she approached him directly. A moment of your time, Uzumaki-san, she requested. Though again her tone made it more statement than question. Hinata hesitated nearby, clearly reluctant to leave Naruto alone with the enigmatic priestess. It's okay, he assured her with a small smile. I'll meet you later to finalize our preparations. With visible reluctance, Hinata departed, leaving Naruto alone with Amaterasu in the now empty corridor outside the council chamber. You have questions, he stated, meeting her unusual eyes directly. As do you, she countered smoothly. Perhaps we can illuminate each other's darkness. Poetic, but vague, Naruto observed, surprising himself with the mild challenge. The entities within him were influencing his responses, he realized, making him more direct, more willing to assert authority. Amaterasu's lips curved slightly, the nearest thing to a genuine smile he'd seen from her. Direct, then. The convergence within you was prophesied, yes, but the specific entities involved were not. Kagai's essence I understand. Her power has lingered in this world since her sealing. The death aspect, your Shinigami, also has established connections to your world through various forbidden techniques. But the third entity, Arceus, Naruto supplied. Yes, that one exists outside any pantheon or cosmic hierarchy known to my order. Its presence raises significant questions. About the true nature of our reality. She replied simply. About whether what we've always believed about the creation of our world is fundamentally incomplete. The implications were staggering, that the cosmic understanding of Amaterasu's ancient order, with centuries of accumulated knowledge, might be upended by what Naruto now represented. I don't have answers for you, he admitted. Not yet. The entities share their knowledge gradually, as I become more capable of comprehending it. And as the integration progresses, she pressed, studying the visible energies beneath his skin. How much of Naruto Uzumaki will remain when the process completes? The question struck at his core fear, the same concern Tsunade had addressed in her own way. All of me, he stated with more certainty than he truly felt. This isn't possession or replacement. It's synthesis. Let us hope you're correct, Amaterasu responded, genuine concern visible beneath her composed exterior. The prophecies speak of two potential outcomes for the god of carnage, transcendent protector or cosmic tyrant. The difference lies in whether humanity remains the core around which the divine coalesces, or merely the vase. Cell consumed by powers beyond mortal comprehension. I won't lose myself, Naruto insisted, though the entities within stirred at his declaration, their combined awareness suggesting the matter wasn't quite so simple. Amaterasu studied him a moment longer before nodding slightly. Then we have common purpose. My order has prepared for this convergence for generations. We possess techniques that may help you maintain equilibrium between your human nature and the cosmic forces you now channel. Why help me? Naruto asked, genuine curiosity overriding caution. You barely know me. I know what you represent, she corrected. The fulcrum upon which our reality now balances. Whether through cosmic design or random chance, the convergence has chosen you. My order's purpose has always been to prepare for this moment, to guide the vessel when it emerges. There was something she wasn't saying. Naruto could sense it in the subtle fluctuations of her chakra, the careful precision of her words. But whatever additional motives she might harbor, her immediate goal aligned with his own, understanding and controlling what he was becoming. I appreciate the offer, he said finally. After we address the Genesis Crater situation, I'd be interested in learning what your order knows about dimensional convergence. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledgement rather than submission. Until dawn, then. As she departed with that same preternatural grace, Naruto found himself considering the connections forming around him. Hinata, evolved beyond her former limitations. Amaterasu, representative of ancient knowledge directly tied to his transformation. Shinra, whose scientific understanding of dimensions complemented the mystical perspectives. Even the mysterious Anbu Lynx, whose NCEA-led identity nagged at his enhanced senses. Each relationship offered different insights, different connections to help anchor his humanity as cosmic forces reshaped him from within. Perhaps that was what Tsunade had meant, surrounding himself with varied perspectives to prevent any single aspect of his new existence from dominating. Lost in thought, he almost didn't notice the subtle dimensional distortion forming in the air beside him. Unlike the violent rifts they'd encountered before, this was a controlled, precise thinning of reality, deliberately created rather than randomly formed. Through this carefully constructed window between worlds, a single eye observed him, not the malevolent awareness of the devourer, but something equally ancient and far more calculated in its attention. The eye, with its distinctive ripple patterns surrounded by Tomo, studied him for precisely 3 seconds before the dimensional aperture closed as cleanly as it had formed. Naruto stared at the space where it had been. The cosmic entities within him suddenly alert with recognition and concern. That had been a Rinnegan, but not like any documented in shinobi history. Its pattern suggested something older, more fundamental to the structure of reality itself. Someone else was watching the convergence unfold, someone with power approaching what Naruto himself now wielded. Whether ally or enemy remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The dimensional crisis had drawn attention from beyond their world, from beings who normally remained content to observe from afar. The game board was expanding, the players multiplying. And Naruto, the god of carnage, the convergence vessel, the reluctant divinity, stood at the center of it all, still struggling to understand the rules of a cosmic contest he hadn't chosen to enter. As he turned to leave, preparing for the journey ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Genesis Crater mission would reveal far more than dimensional weaknesses. It would expose truths about existence itself that the shinobi world had never been meant to discover, truths that would transform not just Naruto Uzumaki, but the very fabric of reality as they understood it. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Fragments of Creation. Dawn arrived in spectrums impossible for ordinary eyes to perceive. Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, observing the village below through his transformed vision. Dimensional currents flowed like luminous rivers through Konoha's infrastructure, pooling at nexus points where reality had grown thin. 27 minor rifts had formed overnight, all contained by Anbu response teams using techniques Naruto had hastily taught them before retiring. He hadn't slept. The cosmic entities within him required no rest, their energies sustaining his physical form beyond normal human limitations. Instead, he'd spent the pre-dawn hours in deep communion with his integrated aspects, navigating the labyrinthine knowledge they offered while fighting to maintain his core identity. Beautiful, isn't it? Naruto didn't turn at the voice. His enhanced senses had detected Amaterasu's approach minutes before she spoke, her unique chakra signature resonating with harmonics that ordinary shinobi couldn't produce. The priestess joined him at the cliff edge, amber gold eyes tracking the same dimensional currents he observed. Terrifying, he corrected quietly. Those energies aren't supposed to be visible in our reality. Nothing is supposed to be, except what is, she countered, the philosophical stance revealing her temple training. Reality is not a fixed state but a negotiation between possibility and perception. Naruto found himself appreciating her perspective despite its abstractness. The entities within him resonated with her worldview, particularly the Arceus aspect, whose fundamental nature transcended conventional concepts of what should or shouldn't exist. The others are gathering at the eastern gate, she informed him. Sunrise gilding her crimson hair with ethereal highlights. Your Hokage has made extensive preparations. The subtle emphasis suggested Amaterasu found such preparations either excessive or amusingly inadequate for the dimensional journey ahead. Perhaps both. Tsunade understands preparation, Naruto replied, loyalty to his leader undiminished by his transformation. Even against threats she can't fully comprehend. The priestess inclined her head in acknowledgement. A commendable quality in one who guards conventional reality. My order prepares differently. We cultivate adaptability over specific countermeasures. Against dimensional flux, rigid strategies often prove more dangerous than flexible responses. Their philosophical differences highlighted an emerging pattern, the contrast between shinobi pragmatism and the more abstract perspectives of those who had long studied cosmic forces. Naruto increasingly found himself straddling both worldviews, the entities within him. Bridging seemingly incompatible paradigms. We should join them, he stated, ending their brief exchange. Without warning, reality rippled around them as Naruto applied his developing spatial manipulation. The mountaintop view dissolved, reconstructing instantly at Konoha's eastern gate where their assembled team awaited departure. Amaterasu showed no surprise at the instantaneous transition. There she had anticipated it, or her training had prepared her for such dimensional shortcuts. The others weren't quite so composed. Some warning next time, Shikamaru muttered, recovering from his startled step backward. Troublesome spatial manipulation. Hinata, already accustomed to Naruto's evolving abilities, merely smiled. Her transformed Byakugan had tracked their translocation despite its near-instantaneous nature. The Anbu operative links remained outwardly impassive behind their mask, though Naruto detected a spike in their chakra signature, surprise carefully controlled. Shinra, still bound with specialized restraints, displayed only clinical interest. Fascinating application of Kaguya's spatial dominance principle. You're refining your control exponentially. The observation wasn't wrong. Each hour brought greater integration with the cosmic entities, accelerating Naruto's mastery over their combined abilities. The implications troubled him even as he welcomed the increased control. Tsunade approached, accompanied by Shizune and several Anbu commanders. Dark circles beneath her eyes testified to a sleepless night overseeing village defenses. The situation has escalated, she informed them without preamble. Rifts have been reported in 17 locations across Fire Country. Suna and Kumo have confirmed similar manifestations within their territories. The convergence is accelerating, Amaterasu stated, unsurprised. As predicted, Tsunade's expression tightened at the priestess's fatalistic tone. We've established emergency protocols and deployed specialized teams to contain the immediate threats. Your mission remains unchanged. Locate the source disturbance at the Genesis crater and seal it permanently. She handed Shikamaru a sealed scroll. Contingency plans and communication protocols. The scroll contains a space-time marker that should function even through dimensional distortion. Another scroll was presented to Hinata. Medical supply. Specialized for dimensional exposure cases, developed overnight by our research division using Shinra's preliminary data. Finally, she turned to Naruto, pressing something into his palm, a custom orged kunai with seals etched into its surface that resonated with his transformed chakra. Your father's technique, modified, she explained quietly. If the situation becomes untenable, it should allow you to return instantly regardless of dimensional interference. The gift carried weight beyond its practical application, an acknowledgement of his heritage, a connection to the humanity Tsunade had encouraged him to maintain. Thank you, he said simply, securing the kunai in a specially designed holster. One addition to your team, Tsunade announced, gesturing to someone waiting in the shadows of the gatehouse. A woman stepped forward, her appearance immediately marking her as no ordinary shinobi. Approximately Naruto's age, she wore a sleek bodysuit of material that resembled liquid metal. Shifting subtly with her movements. Glowing circuitry patterns traced her right arm up to her face, where a cybernetic enhancement replaced what had once been her right eye. The artificial orb glowed with soft blue light, constantly scanning and analyzing their surroundings. Reina Kagura, Tsunade introduced, specialist in quantum chakra theory and interdimensional mathematics. On loan from the Advanced Research Division. That division doesn't exist, Shikamaru noted immediately, eyebrow raised. Precisely, Tsunade confirmed without elaboration. Reina stepped forward, her mauve ements possessing mechanical precision that suggested further enhancements beyond the visible ones. Her remaining natural eye was sharp with intelligence that bordered on cynicism. My research team has been tracking dimensional anomalies for years, she stated, her voice carrying subtle electronic harmonics. Your transformed state is consistent with theoretical models of cosmic vessel convergence. She addressed Naruto directly, clinical interest evident in her analysis. No fear, no awe, just scientific curiosity regarding an unprecedented phenomenon. You're not just here to study me, Naruto observed, sensing deeper motivation beneath her professional exterior. Reina's cybernetic eye adjusted focus, scanning him with intensifying blue light. Correct. My primary objective concerns the Genesis crater specifically. My civilization requires data from the origin point. Your civilization? Hinata questioned, her evolved Byakugan studying the woman with increasing interest. You're not from our dimension. The revelation might have shocked the others if dimensional boundaries hadn't already been collapsing around them for days. Instead, it merely added another layer of complex ity to their already unprecedented mission. I am from a parallel world where technological development followed different principles than yours, Reina confirmed without hesitation. A reality adjacent to this one, currently experiencing accelerated dimensional decay due to the same convergence affecting your world. Which explains your interest in Naruto, Shikamaru deduced, mind already analyzing potential motives. His abilities might offer solutions for your civilization. Among other applications, Reina agreed, offering no further clarification. Naruto sensed Tsunade's calculation in adding this interdimensional scientist to their team, both to gain her specialized knowledge and to keep her under observation. Trust remained conditional, but pragmatism dictated cooperation against shared threats. Time grows short, Amaterasu interjected, gesturing toward the horizon where subtle dimensional fractures were visible to their enhanced perceptions. The journey to the Genesis Sea Raider becomes more dangerous with each passing hour as reality destabilizes. Tsunade nodded grimly. Then we won't delay you further. Regular communication as conditions allow. If conventional methods fail, we've established backup protocols through summons. The formality of a traditional mission departure seemed oddly mundane given the cosmic stakes involved. Yet Naruto found himself appreciating this final anchor to normal shinobi procedure before they ventured into realms where such structures would hold no meaning. With brief nods of acknowledgement, the assembled team turned eastward, crossing the threshold of Konoha's protective walls into a world increasingly transformed by dimensional bleeding. Their journey to the land of ancestors, and the Genesis crater that represented both the beginning and potential end of their reality, had begun. The landscape transformed with each passing mile, dimensional distortions manifesting in increasingly disturbing ways. What began as subtle, visual anomalies, colors shifting beyond normal spectrum, shadows falling at impossible angles, evolved into fundamental alterations of natural law. They passed a meadow where gravity reversed in pulsing waves, sending vegetation alternating between growing normally and stretching toward the sky in defiance of fundamental forces. A stream flowed upstream and downstream simultaneously, water existing in quantum superposition. Forest creatures displayed impossible anatomies, deer with too many legs, birds with geometrically perfect patterns replacing feathers. Reality degradation progressing faster than projected, Reina observed, her cybernetic eye constantly recording data as they traveled. Dimensional boundary integrity at 63% and declining. Can you determine if these are random manifestations or directed intrusions? Shikamaru asked, his strategic mind already analyzing patterns in the distortions. Both, she replied, manipulating a holographic interface that projected from her enhanced arm. Background dimensional decay creates random anomalies. Overlaid on that pattern are deliberate incursion attempts, probes testing for weaknesses. The Devourer, Naruto confirmed, sensing the familiar malevolent presence behind the more organized disruptions. It's becoming more sophisticated in its approach. Hinata's evolved Byakugan scanned their surroundings, perceiving layers of reality invisible to others. The entity is learning from each interaction, adapting its intrusion techniques based on resistance encountered. Intelligent consumption, Amaterasu added grimly. The most dangerous form of dimensional predator. It doesn't merely feed, it studies its prey. They continued eastward, altering their route to avoid the most severe distortions. Conventional travel proved increasingly challenging as terrain itself became unreliable. A mountain ridge they needed to cross kept shifting position, sometimes kilometers from its proper location, forcing them to adjust accordingly. By midday, they encountered their first major obstacle, a rift spanning nearly half a kilometer across what had once been a trading outpost. The small settlement was unrecognizable now, buildings and inhabitants caught in a state of quantum uncertainty. Structures existed in multiple configurations simultaneously, people frozen in overlapping potential states of being. Probability collapse, Shinra identified, studying the phenomenon with professional interest despite her prisoner status. Reality unable to resolve quantum superposition due to dimensional interference. Can these people be saved? Naruto asked, the human cost foremost in his mind despite the cosmic scale of their mission. Reina's cybernetic eye performed complex calculations, projections appearing briefly in the air before her. Theoretically, if the dimensional boundary is reinforced and local reality parameters are reset to baseline. You mean I can fix this? Naruto translated, already feeling the cosmic entities within him responding to the situation, offering aspects of their combined knowledge relevant to the task. At significant energy expenditure, Amaterasu cautioned. Each intervention depletes resources needed for our primary objective. Naruto understood the pragmatic concern, but his core values remained unchanged despite his transformation. We don't sacrifice innocence for strategic advantage. Never. Without waiting for further discussion, he stepped toward the edge of the probability field. The entities within him aligned in momentary harmony, recognizing his unshakable resolve on this matter. Drawing on their combined powers, Kaguya's reality manipulation, the Shinigami's authority over states of being, and Arceus's fundamental creation principle. Naruto began the complex process of reality restoration. His transformed eyes perceived the quantum entanglement affecting the settlement, each possibility branch creating its own timeline, each timeline straining against the others for dominance. Conventional physics couldn't resolve the contradictions, leaving everything suspended in potentially endless uncertainty. I need to establish a baseline reality, Naruto explained as energy began flowing visibly beneath his skin. Hinata, can you identify the most stable probability stream? Her evolved Byakugan activated fully, concentric silver circles rotating as she analyzed the quantum tangle before them. Third variation from primary sequence. Minimal casualties, structural integrity at 78%. That timeline, Naruto confirmed, extending his awareness into the probability field. With precision that would have been impossible days earlier, he began selectively reinforcing the identified reality stream while NTLY collapsing the competing alternatives. The process required delicacy rather than raw power, convincing reality itself to choose one definitive state from countless possibilities. The others watched in fascinated silence as Naruto worked. No dramatic gestures or showy techniques marked his effort, just intense concentration as he communed directly with the fundamental structures of existence. Reality rippled around the settlement. Probability streams gradually merging toward the selected baseline. As the quantum uncertainty resolved, the trading post gradually stabilized. Buildings settled into definite configurations. Objects found permanent positions, and most importantly, people transitioned from superposition to singular existence. Some collapsed immediately, unconscious but alive. Others stood bewildered, experiencing simultaneous memories of multiple potential timelines that were now merely hypothetical. When the process completed, Naruto exhaled slowly. The energy expenditure had been significant but manageable, his control improving exponentially with each application. Dimensional boundary reinforced locally, he reported, scanning the area with his transformed perception. It should hold against minor fluctuations, though another major incursion would overwhelm the patches. Reina approached the edge of the now stabilized settlement, her cybernetic eye scanning rapidly. Fascinating application of quantum collapse principles. Your instinctive methodology parallels advanced theoretical models my civilization has only recently developed. Not instinct, Naruto corrected, gesturing vaguely toward his head where the cosmic entities resided. Guidance from perspectives that understand reality at a fundamental level. Regardless, most impressive, she acknowledged. Something shifting in her clinical demeanor, a hint of genuine respect breaking through her scientific detachment. The energy efficiency ratio exceeded projected parameters by 37%. Before Naruto could respond, villagers from the restored settlement approached cautiously. Their expressions displayed the universal human response to the incomprehensible, fear and awe intermingled. Uncertainty seeking resolution through familiar frameworks. Some bowed deeply, others made religious gestures, a few simply stared in wordless shock. An elderly woman stepped forward as their representative, her weathered face displaying more curiosity than fear. "What are you?" she asked simply, the directness of age cutting through social niceties. The question had become familiar since his transformation, though no less complex to answer. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he replied, emphasizing his humanity first. "I'm a shinobi from Konoha, though I've changed recently." "Changed," the elder repeated with a knowing look that suggested the understatement hadn't gone unnoticed. "You pulled us back from the between place. We were everywhere and nowhere, living and not living all at once." Her description of quantum superposition displayed intuitive understanding that many scholars would envy. Naruto nodded confirmation. "The boundaries between realities are weakening. What happened here is occurring throughout the land. The ancient warnings," she murmured, eyes widening with recognition. "The temple scriptures speak of the time of unmaking, when existence would forget its proper shape." She studied Naruto more intently. "They also speak of the three who, or one who would either preserve or destroy all that is." Amaterasu stepped forward at this, sudden interest sharpening her features. "Your village maintains temple scriptures. From what tradition?" "The Order of Perpetual Dawn," the elder replied, gesturing toward a small shrine visible at the settlement's edge. "Maintained since before the hidden village system, passed down through generations of keepers." The priestess exchanged a meaningful glance with Naruto. "A sister order to my own temple. The prophecies align." This confirmation of multiple independent sources predicting the current crisis lent additional weight to Amaterasu's earlier claims. The dimensional collapse wasn't merely an ident of Akatsuki experimentation but an anticipated cosmic event for which certain traditions had been preparing for centuries. "We seek the Genesis crater," Amaterasu informed the elder. "Has Pasa, ge to the land of ancestors, been affected by the distortions?" The old woman's expression grew troubled. "The eastern roads have been changed. Travelers report paths that loop back on themselves. Destinations that cannot be reached regardless of direction, landmarks that relocate overnight. Few attempt the journey now. We don't have a choice," Naruto stated, determination hardening his voice. "The source of these distortions must be addressed at its origin point." The elder studied him a moment longer before nodding. "Then you will need a guide who understands the changed landscape." She turned, gesturing toward someone in the gathered crowd. "Hira has mapped the new paths as they form. She can show you the ways between the broken places." A young woman approximately Naruto's age stepped forward, her appearance immediately marking her as unusual even by the increasingly strange standards of their world. Elaborate tattoos covered her visible skin, not decorative patterns but precise cartographic markings that shifted subtly as they watched, updating in real time to reflect dimensional changes. "Living map," Reina identified with professional interest. "Quantum entangled Mal inscriptions synchronized to territorial reality fluctuations." Hira regarded the cybernetic scientist with mild amusement. "My family has guided travelers for generations. When the land began changing, we adapted." She raised her arm, where the tattoos rearranged themselves to display their current location and potential routes eastward. "The paths shift, but patterns exist within the chaos. I can navigate them." Shikamaru assessed the potential guide with characteristic thoroughness. "Adding another member complicates our operational parameters. Conventional navigation is impossible through dimensional instability." Hinata countered practically. Her assistance would be invaluable. The Anbu operative Lynx, who had remained silent throughout most of their journey, finally spoke. "Security concerns must be addressed. Unknown civilian integration requires additional protocols." Something about the ANBU's voice nagged at Naruto's enhanced perception, familiar cadences beneath the deliberate modulation, suggesting an identity he should recognize but couldn't quite place. "I vouch for her," the village elder stated firmly. Kira has guided 3 recovery missions through the distortions without casualties. Her loyalty is to the land itself, not political factions. After brief consultation, the team agreed to accept her assistance. Preparations were made quickly, with Kira gathering minimal supplies while explaining the fundamentals of her navigational abilities to an increasingly fascinated Reina. The tattoos respond to dimensional currents. The scientist questioned, cybernetic eye scanning the living maps with intense interest. Kira nodded, apparently accustomed to curiosity about her unusual ability. They're created using ink infused with materials from dimensional boundary zones, places where reality naturally thins. The markings sense changes in spatial topology and adjust accordingly. Dimensional sympathetic resonance, Shinra identified, Profe. Shinal interest momentarily overriding her prisoner status. Similar principles to techniques my research division developed for autonomous probes. As the others finalized preparations, Naruto found D himself drawn to the small temple the elder had indicated earlier. The shrine's architecture predated the hidden village system by centuries, its foundations incorporating elements resembling those he'd observed at the Hyuga Celestial Temple. Inside, ancient scrolls and tablets lined carefully preserved shelves. Symbols carved into supporting columns matched patterns he recognized from both Kaguya's primal knowledge and the Arceus aspect's universal language. This place had been established by people who understood dimensional boundaries, who had perhaps witnessed previous thinning events throughout history. Amaterasu joined him, her expression confirming his suspicions. Another waypoint in the ancient network, she noted, fingers tracing inscriptions with practiced familiarity. Our ancestors established these monitoring stations throughout the continent, each maintaining records of dimensional fluctuations across generations. They knew this would happen, Naruto concluded, mining a particularly old tablet depicting 3 converging forces within a human-shaped vessel. They were preparing for the convergence. For potential convergence, Amaterasu corrected, retrieving a sealed scroll from a hidden compartment with unerring precision that suggested prior knowledge of the shrine's layout. The prophecies described possibilities, not certainties. Many potential vessels have been born throughout history. Individuals with the capacity to host cosmic entities. None before you achieved complete integration. The revelation that others had been candidates for his Rent state raised uncomfortable questions. What happened to them? Amaterasu's expression darkened slightly. Most lived ordinary lives, their potential never activated. Some experienced partial awe, awakening, momentary contact with one aspect or another. Those few, she hesitated, rarely survived the experience intact. Cosmic awareness without proper containment shatters human consciousness. Yet here I stand, Naruto observed, uncertain whether to feel fortunate or cursed by his successful integration. Indeed, the priestess acknowledged, studying him with renewed interest. Which is his fundamental questions about why you succeeded where others failed. What makes Naruto Uzumaki capable of housing 3 cosmic entities simultaneously without immediate dissolution of self? The question had occupied Naruto's own thoughts increasingly as the integration progressed. The entities within him offered no simple answer. Their understanding of human consciousness operated on principles beyond conventional psychology. Perhaps my experience as a Jinchuriki prepared me, he suggested, the theory forming as he spoke. I've contained the 9 tails since birth, developed mental party-tuning techniques to manage its influence. Maybe that created cognitive architecture suitable for cosmic integration. A plausible hypothesis, Amaterasu agreed, securing the retrieved scroll within her robes. Though incomplete, many Jinchuriki have existed throughout history. None manifested similar potential. Before they could explore the matter further, Hinata appeared at the shrine entrance. We're ready to depart, she informed them, her evolved Byakugan briefly scanning the ancient texts with evident interest. Kira has identified a route that avoids major distortion zones. Naruto nodded, filing away the unanswered questions for later consideration. Understanding his unique compatibility with cosmic entities, while intellectually interesting, remained secondary to their IATE mission of preventing dimensional collapse. They rejoined the others at the settlement's eastern edge, where Kira stood examining the constantly shifting patterns on her arms. The living map displayed their planned route through increasingly unstable territories toward the land of ancestors. The direct path is compromised, she explained, indicating areas on her skin where the tattoos became distorted and unclear. Major reality fractures have rendered conventional space-time non-viable approximately 30 kilometers eastward. We'll need to navigate between the fractures, utilizing STA/BLE corridors that still maintain dimensional integrity. How long? Shikamaru asked, already calculating resource allocation for extended travel. 3 days minimum, Hira replied, the tattoos shifting to display temporal variables. Assuming current degradation rates remain constant. They won't, Reina interjected, cybernetic eye projecting calculation matrices into the air before her. Dimensional decay accelerates exponentially once critical thresholds are breached. Conservative models suggest 60% increased distortion within 24 hours. The implications were clear. Their journey would become progressively more challenging, with viable paths disappearing as reality itself continued fragmenting around them. Time was not merely limited but actively contracting. Then we move quickly, Naruto decided. Determination setting his transformed eyes aglow with subtle energy. Hira leads, Hinata and I monitor dimensional stability, everyone else maintains alert status. For both conventional and reality-based threats. With roles established, they departed the restored settlement under the watchful eyes of villagers who had experienced firsthand both the horrors of dimensional collapse and the possibility of restoration. Their expressions followed Naruto specifically, hope and fear intermingled as they witnessed the physical embodiment of ancient prophecies set forth to either save their world or participate in its final unmaking. The journey quickly proved more challenging than anticipated. Conventional terrain gave way to landscapes that defied logical navigation. Forests where spatial relationships became non-Euclidean, paths that extended infinitely despite covering finite distances, clearings where time flowed at different rates depending on precise location. Hira navigated these impossibilities with remarkable skill, her living maps constantly updating to reflect local reality parameters. Step exactly where I step, she instructed as EY traversed a meadow where gravity fluctuated unpredictably. The stable points shift, but follow patterns detectable in dimensional currents. Throughout the afternoon, they encountered increasing evidence of wildlife affected by dimensional bleeding. Creatures transformed by exposure to alien physics displayed impossible anatomies and behaviors. Birds that flew through solid matter, predators had existed partially out of phase with conventional reality, vegetation that grew according to mathematical principles from other dimensions. Evolutionary adaptation to dimensional flux, Reina observed, documenting particularly unusual specimens with her cybernetic systems. My world experienced similar biological responses during early collapse phases. Those organisms capable of incorporating extra-dimensional properties survived. Those bound to conventional physics perished. You speak as though your civilization's dimensional collapse is further advanced than ours, Shikamaru noted. Strategic mind ever alert for relevant intelligence. Reina's expression remained clinical, though something flickered behind her natural eye, old pain carefully contained. Correct. My reality began experiencing boundary degradation approximately 70 years before yours. We've developed adaptation technologies and dimensional stabilization systems that allow continuation of civilization despite progressive collapse. Yet you're here seeking solutions, Hinata observed, her evolved Byakugan perceiving deeper motivations than Reina verbalized. Which suggests your adaptations are ultimately insufficient. The scientist's cybernetic eye whirred softly as focus mechanisms adjusted. Adaptation permits survival, not prosperity. Each generation loses more of baseline reality. The Genesis Cr. Ader represents our last hope for fundamental restoration rather than perpetual decline. Her admission carried emotional weight despite her mechanical delivery. Naruto sensed genuine desperation beneath her scientific facade. Not merely academic interest but existential need driving her research. Your civilization sent you alone? He questioned, finding it unlikely that such a critical mission would have single representation. Something closed in Reina's expression. I am adequate for initial assessment. Depending on findings, additional resources may be allocated. The careful Frasen G suggested complications she preferred not to discuss. Naruto chose not to press further for now, though the entities within him registered subtle falsehoods in her explanation. Whatever her complete motives, They extended beyond what she had shared. As dusk approached, the dimensional distortions intensified, making further progress increasingly hazardous. Kira identified a relatively stable low cation for overnight rest, a natural formation of stone pillars arranged in patterns that seemed to naturally repel reality fluctuations. Dimensional dampening properties in the mineral composition, she explained as they established camp within the formation's protective influence. Many such locations exist throughout the territories. Ancient peoples often built shrines around them, recognizing their stabilizing effects without understanding the mechanisms. Amaterasu examined the stone pillars with knowing recognition. These formations aren't natural, she corrected. They're remnants of the dimensional anchor network established during the First Thinning Era, approximately 3,000 years ago. My order maintains historical records of their creation. This revelation sparked immediate interest from both Reina and Shinra, their scientific curiosity temporarily overriding other concerns. Deliberate dimensional engineering predating modern civilization, Shinra questioned, exa mining the pillars despite her restrained condition. The technological implications are significant. Not technology as you conceptualize it, Amaterasu clarified. The ancients understood real it. Why manipulation through principles that integrated consciousness and material properties directly? They perceived no distinction between mind, energy, and matter. All were expressions of a unified dimensional framework. As the others established security perimeters and prepared rations, conversation continued around these ancient dimensional sciences. Reina documented the stone formation with her cybernetic systems while Shinra offered theories regarding their operational principles. Amaterasu shared limited historical context from her order's records, carefully omitting details she clearly deemed inappropriate for general knowledge. Throughout the discussion, Naruto found himself understanding concepts that should have been beyond his comprehension, the cosmic entities providing context to ND perspective that transformed abstract theories into intuitive knowledge. The integration continued progressing, boundaries between his consciousness and theirs becoming increasingly permeable. As night fully descended, dimensional distortions became visually apparent even to unenhanced perception. The sky above displayed impossible astronomical configurations, constellations from other realities bleeding through. Stars shifting positions contrary to cosmic mechanics, occasionally entire celestial bodies appearing briefly before fading back beyond dimensional boundaries. Naruto took first watch, his transformed physiology requiring minimal rest. He positioned himself atop the highest stone pillar, enhanced senses monitoring both conventional threats and dimensional fluctuations across kilometers in all directions. Hinata joined him shortly after others had settled into rest cycles. Without her family's traditional reserve, she seated herself beside him, transformed by Akugan Periode. Kali activating to scan their surroundings. The entities are changing you, she observed after comfortable silence, no judgment in her tone, merely recognition of undeniable fact. Naruto nodded, appreciating her directness. The integration progresses faster than I anticipated. Their knowledge, their perspectives, they're becoming difficult to distinguish from my own thoughts. Are you afraid? A question she might never have asked before her own evolution. Not of the power, he admitted, cosmic energies visibly flowing beneath his skin as he spoke. But of distance. With each integration milestone, I perceive reality differently, process experiences through additional frameworks. I worry that eventually I'll see the world so differently that human concerns, human connections will become abstract. The fear was fundamental, not of losing control but of losing relatability, of ascending to a perspective where the individuals he cared about became indistinguishable from broader patterns. Where personal connections dissolved into cosmic awareness. Hinata considered his concern thoughtfully before responding. When my Byakugan evolved, I experienced something similar on a lesser scale. Suddenly I could perceive reality layers previously invisible, understand connections beyond conventional perception. People became more than their physical forms, energy networks, probability matrices. Potential states all simultaneously visible. She turned toward him, transformed eyes meeting his directly. I feared I would lose myself in the expanded perception that individuals would become merely complex energy systems rather than people I cared about. But I discovered something unexpected. Greater perception can enhance connection rather than diminish it. I see more of who people truly are, not less. The insight resonated with something the entities had been attempting to communicate, that transcendent awareness need not eliminate specific attachment but could potentially transform it into something more comprehensive. Does it get easier? He asked quietly, balancing the expanded perspective with normal human interaction. It becomes different, she answered honestly. Not easier or harder, simply integrated differently. I'm still learning the balance myself. Their shared experience of transformation created understanding between them that required no additional explanation. Unlike others who observed Naruto's changes from external perspective, Hinata comprehended the internal reconfiguration of consciousness that accompanied expanded perception. Something's approaching, she suddenly stated, Byakugan activating fully as she scanned the northeastern perimeter. Approximately 2 kilometers out, moving erratically. Not fully materialized in our dimension. Naruto extended his senses in the indicated direction, immediately detecting the anomaly, a consciousness unlike any naturally occurring in their world, partially phased between dimensional boundaries. Its movement pattern suggested purposeful navigation toward their location rather than random dimensional drift. Wake the others, he instructed, already shifting toward his more transformed state in preparation for potential confrontation. Whatever it is, it's locked onto our position specifically. Hinata descended quickly to alert the team while Naruto maintained sensory focus on the approaching entity. It moved with increasing purpose now, apparently aware of his attention, accelerating toward their camp with determined intent. Within minutes, the entire team had MB led in defensive formation around the stone pillars. Reina's cybernetic systems hummed with activity as she established sensor perimeters. Shikamaru positioned himself strategically to maximize manipulation effectiveness despite the dimensional instabilities. Amaterasu prepared what appeared to be ritual implements specifically designed for extra-dimensional entities. Even Shinra had been granted limited chakra access under Lynx's careful supervision to provide analytical support. Classification: Dimensional Hunter, Reina announced as her sensors collected preliminary data. Predat, Ori entity that evolved to feed on dimensional boundary energy. My world encountered similar organisms during mid-stage collapse. Dangerous, Shikamaru asked practically. Extremely, the scientist confirmed. They perceive dimensional manipulation abilities as both threat and food source. Your transformed state, she nodded toward Naruto, likely drew its attention from considerable distance. The entity breached the final kilometer, its form becoming partially visible as it entered their reality more completely. The appearance defied conventional biological categorization, a shifting amalgamation of geometries that seemed to reorient themselves through dimensions beyond normal perception. Limbs appeared and disappeared as it moved, sensory organs rearranged according to some alien logic. Its entire being bleeding between states of existence. It's beautiful, Hinata whispered, her evolved Byakugan perceiving aspects of the creature invisible to others. Despite its predatory nature, Naruto found himself agreeing with her assessment. The creature represented a completely novel evolutionary approach, adaptation to interdimensional existence rather than any single reality framework. In some sense, it embodied the ultimate survival strategy for universes experiencing boundary collapse. As the entity approached the perimeter of their stone formation, it paused, seemingly assessing the dimensional dampening properties of the ancient pillars. After brief consideration, it began circling their position, testing for weaknesses in the natural protection. It's intelligent, Naruto observed, sensing purpose and strategy behind its movements. Not merely instinctual. Advanced environmental adaptation requires significant cognitive processing, Reina confirmed. These NTERS develop problem-solving capabilities comparable to high-order predators within conventional ecosystems. The creature completed its initial assessment of their protected position, then did something unexpected. It manifested a more stable form and approached directly, its movements now conveying non-aggressive intent. The shifting geometries settled into an approximation of bilateral symmetry, sensory clusters orienting toward them in what appeared to be a communication posture. It's trying to establish contact, Amaterasu realized, lowering the ritual implements she had prepared. TS is unprecedented in historical records of dimensional incursions. Naruto sensed opportunity beyond immediate threat. If communication with this entity was possible, they might gain valuable intel. Guidance regarding dimensional conditions beyond their perception. Stepping forward despite the team's concerned objections, he extended his consciousness toward the creature, utilizing the cosmic entities, knowledge of interdimensional communication principles. Rather than language or conventional telepathy, he projected conceptual frameworks, geometric patterns representing peaceful intent, information exchange, mutual benefit. The dimensional hunter responded immediately, its form rippling with patterns that mimicked Naruto's conceptual projection. A connection established between their consciousness, not words but pure concept transfer flowing between completely different forms of awareness. Through this exchange, Naruto gleaned crucial information. The creature was indeed drawn by his dimensional signature. But not merely as predator to prey. It recognized the cosmic convergence within him as potentially significant to the accelerating collapse affecting multiple realities simultaneously. Its species had evolved specifically in response to dimensional thinning, developing abilities to navigate the spaces between collapsing worlds. Most significantly, it conveyed knowledge of what lay ahead on their journey. The dimensional landscape between their current position and the Genesis crater had degraded beyond conventional navigation. Reality itself had shattered into fragments, held together by increasingly tenuous connections. Their planned route was no longer viable through normal means. When the information exchange completed, Naruto turned to his companions, translating the conceptual communication into terms they could comprehend. The path ahead has collapsed completely, he explained, cosmic energies flowing more prominently beneath his skin as the entities processed the new information. Conventional space-time has fragmented into disconnected reality shards. Physical travel through traditional means is impossible. My maps confirm this, Kira acknowledged, displaying her arms where the tattoos had become increasingly chaotic and illegible beyond a certain point. The pathways simply end. I've never seen degradation progress so rapidly. Then we're trapped, Shinra concluded. Scientific mind already calculating alternative approaches. Unless we identify another route to the Genesis crater. No other routes exist, Amaterasu stated with certainty. If the direct path has collapsed, all alternatives would be similarly affected. The dimensional decay radiates outward from the crater itself. Silence fell as they considered the implications. Their mission had reached an apparent impasse before even approaching their destination. The Genesis crater, and any hope of addressing the dimensional crisis at its source, seemed beyond reach. Naruto, however, felt the cosmic entities stirring within him, offering knowledge he hadn't previously accessed. The Kaguya aspect particularly provided insight regarding dimensional navigation beyond conventional space-time frameworks. There's another way, he stated, drawing their attention. Not through space as we understand it, but through conceptual planes that exist perpendicular to physical reality. Reina's cybernetic eye whirred with intense activity. You're describing dimensional orthogonality theory, navigation by shifting 90 degrees from conventional reality coordinates through conceptual rather than physical space. Essentially, Naruto confirmed, though the entities, understanding transcended even this advanced theoretical framework. I can create a transitional space, a pocket dimension calibrated specifically for passage through the collapsed territories. You're proposing to create an entirely new dimension? Shikamaru questioned, eyebrow raised at the audacious solution. Just like that, not entirely new, Naruto corrected, the Arceus aspect providing clarification through his consciousness. More accurately, a controlled subdimension existing partially outside normal space-time constraints. A bridge between fragments of broken reality. Amaterasu's expression shifted from concern to cautious approval. The ancient records speak of similar technique. Used during previous thinning events, creating pathways through conceptual space when physical routes became non-viable. The energy requirements would be enormous, Shinra noted, professional in terrorist overriding her prisoner status as she calculated theoretical parameters, sustaining an artificial dimensional construct across collapsed space-time. I can manage it, Naruto assured her, cosmic energies responding visibly to his intent. The entities provide both the knowledge and power required. The limitation isn't energy but precision, maintaining exact calibration between entry and exit points. Hinata immediately grasped the implied need. My evolved Byakugan can perceive dimensional coordinates with sufficient precision. I can guide the calibration process. With theoretical approach established, they turned to practical implementation. The Dimensional Hunter remained nearby, apparently intending to observe or perhaps utilize the passage they would create. Its presence proved unexpectedly beneficial as Naruto drew on its intuitive understanding of interdimensional navigation to refine his approach. We should proceed at first light, Shikamaru suggested practically. Creating entirely new dimensional constructs seems like the kind of thing best attempted with clear heads and full chakra reserves. The recommendation was sound, though Naruto suspected their window of opportunity might be narrowing. Already he could perceive accelerating degradation in the dimensional fabric surrounding them, the protective influence of the stone formation weakening against increasing pressure from collapsing realities. As the team returned to rest positions, maintaining rotational watch, Naruto remained aware of the Dimensional Hunter circling their perimeter. Not threatening but observing with evident curiosity. Its presence represented something significant. The first non-hostile interdimensional entity they'd encountered amid the crisis, suggesting the possibility of allies beyond conventional reality. When morning arrived, or what passed for morning in increasingly distorted space-time, they prepared for the unprecedented attempt at creating a transitional dimension. The Dimensional Hunter remained, joined overnight by three similar entities apparently drawn by communication signals from the first. They're forming an observation pod, Reina noted, cyber. NETIC systems documenting the creatures' interactions. Social behavior indicates developed intelligence beyond individual problem solving. Can they assist our passage? Naruto asked, sensing potential cooperation beyond mere observation. Reina considered the possibility with evident surprise. Theoretically, their natural dimensional phase-shifting abilities might stabilize the boundaries of your constructed passage. A symbiotic approach. Communication with the entities required Naruto's direct consciousness projection, but with effort, he established sufficient understanding to secure their cooperation. The creatures would help maintain dimensional boundary integrity in exchange for energy emanations naturally produced by the passage creation process, a mutually beneficial arrangement. With preparations complete, Naruto positioned himself at the center of the stone formation. The others arranged themselves according to function, Hinata nearby to guide dimensional calibration, Amaterasu establishing ritualistic boundary markers from her temple tradition, Reina monitoring with her cybernetic systems, Shikamaru coordinating overall security, Lynx watching Shinra who had been granted limited chakra access to assist with technical calculations. The process requires complete concentration, Naruto explained, cosmic energies now flowing prominently beneath his increasingly translucent skin. Once initiated, I can't stop until the passage is fully formed and stabilized. If anything interrupts the sequence, he left the potential consequences unstated, though all understood the dangers inherent in manipulating dimensional boundaries amid accelerating collapse. How exactly do we traverse this pocket dimension once created? Shikamaru asked, practical concerns foremost as always. You simply walk into it. Naruto explained, the entities providing understanding that seemed intuitively obvious to his transformed perspective. The passage will maintain continuous connection between entry and exit points regardless of the collapsed space-time between them. Distance inside will be compressed relative to external reality. With final questions addressed, Naruto began the complex process of dimensional creation. Drawing simultaneously on all three cosmic aspects, Kaguya's reality manipulation, the Shinigami's authority over states of being, and Arceus's fundamental creation principles, he established the conceptual framework for a space existing orthogonal to conventional reality. The air around him seemed to fold inward, light bending at impossible angles. As space-time responded to his manipulation, the Dimensional Hunters moved into position around the forming distortion, their bodies phase shifting to stabilize the emerging boundaries between realities. Coordinate lock established, Hinata reported, her evolved Byakugan tracking invisible dimensional markers. Genesis crater location anchored as terminus point. Naruto acknowledged with slight nod. Focus absolute as he continued the delicate process. Unlike the violent rifts created by the Devourer's intrusions, this dimensional passage formed with precise intent, a controlled bridge between realities rather than destructive breach. As the pocket dimension took shape, a doorway seemingly opened in the air before them, not merely a visual distortion but an actual entrance to somewhere else. Through this opening, they glimpsed a space that defied conventional physics. Inside, pathways of crystallized light stretched toward a distant point, the entire construct existing in a state of perpetual twilight tinged with colors from beyond normal spectrum. Passage stabilization at 73%, Reina reported, cybernetic eye scanning the dimensional construct. Remarkable NG, nearing coherence for first attempt implementation. The compliment barely registered as Naruto maintained absolute focus on the increasingly complex dimensional parameters. Creating the passage was merely the first step. Sustaining it against the pressure of collapsing realities required continuous adjustment and energy infusion. "We need to move quickly," he instructed, voice carrying harmonic overtones as the cosmic entities channeled directly through his consciousness. The passage will remain stable for approximately 6 hours before requiring recalibration. Shikamaru immediately IZED their entry sequence. Links first with Shinra to secure the initial pathway, followed by Kira, Reina and himself, with Amaterasu preceding Naruto and Hinata who would enter last to maintain the passage integrity from the origin point. The dimensional hunters circled the opening with evident excitement, their forms shifting more rapidly as they prepared to accompany the travelers through this novel construct. Their assistance had proven invaluable, instinctively reinforcing weak points in the dimensional boundaries as they formed. As the team prepared to enter, Naruto felt subtle resistance against his creation. Not random fluctuation but deliberate opposition. The Devourer had noticed their dimensional manipulation, its vast awareness turning toward this new development with malevolent interest. While not directly attacking yet, it was clearly monitoring their activities with increasing attention. "We need to move," Naruto urged, sensing the entity's growing focus. "We've attracted unwanted attention." Without further delay, they began entering the passage in established sequence. Each traveler experienced momentary disorientation upon crossing the threshold between conventional reality and the pocket dimension, sensory systems adjusting to fundamentally different physical laws. When Naruto and Hinata finally entered, sealing the origin point behind them, the full nature of his creation became apparent. The pocket dimension existed as a self-contained reality with its own internal logic, a space designed specifically for efficient transit between disconnected fragments of their collapsing world. Inside, distance operated differently, compression ratios allowing kilometers of external space to be traversed in meters within the construct. Gravity functioned uniformly despite the lack of conventional mass. Light emanated from the structure itself rather than external sources. Even time flowed at adjusted rates, optimized for their journey. "This is beyond our theoretical models," Reina admitted. Cybernetic systems struggling to quantify the dimensional parameters surrounding them. "You've created a fully functional reality substrate with integrated transit functionality." The scientific assessment barely captured the achievement. Naruto had instinctively manifested knowledge from the cosmic entities that transcended conventional dimensional science by orders of magnitude, creating not merely a tunnel through reality but an entirely functional subdimension with its own coherent physical laws. Their journey through this crystalline passage proceeded more efficiently than anticipated. The dimensional hunters moved alongside them, occasionally phase shifting to reinforce boundary integrity where needed. Their alien forms seemed more natural within the pocket dimension, suggesting the environment more closely matched their native dimensional parameters. As they proceeded, Naruto maintained continuous awareness of the passage's structural integrity while simultaneously monitoring the growing attention from the Devourer. The entity's awareness pressed against the dimensional boundaries with increasing interest, testing for vulnerabilities without yet committing to direct intrusion. "It's learning from this too," he realized aloud. "Studying how dimensional creation functions. A predator evolving to counter prey adaptations," Reina observed clinically. "Consistent with advanced consumption patterns observed in my reality." The implications were concerning. Each demonstration of their capabilities provided the Devourer with additional information to refine its approach. Yet they had no alternative but to continue utilizing every available tool against the dimensional collapse. Approximately halfway through their transit, the passage shuddered violently. Not structural failure but external impact. Something had struck the dimensional boundaries with significant force, testing their resilience. "Deliberate attack," Hinata confirmed. her evolved Byakugan tracking energies beyond the passage walls. The Devourer is no longer merely observing. It's attempting to breach the construct. Naruto reinforced the dimensional boundaries, channeling additional cosmic energy to maintain integrity against the assault. The effort required greater concentration, dividing his awareness between maintaining their transit path and defending against external intrusion. "How long until we reach the terminus?" Shikamaru asked, strategic mind already formulating contingency plans. "Approximately 3 hours at current transit speed," Naruto estimated. Feeling the strain of simultaneously creating, maintaining, and defending the dimensional passage. Assuming no further complications, the qualification proved immediately prophetic as another stronger impact shook the entire construct. This time, the assault left visible damage, a fracture in the crystalline structure of the passage that leaked luminous energy into the void beyond. "Breach in progress," Reina reported, cybernetic eye focusing on the damaged section. "Dimensional integrity compromised at Section 273. The dimensional hunters reacted immediately, 3. Converging on the damaged area while 1 remained with the travelers. Their bodies' phase shifted to extremely high frequencies, temporarily merging with the dimensional boundaries to reinforce the weakened structure. They're buying us time," Naruto realized, sensing the creatures' intent through their conceptual communication. "But they can't maintain boundary integrity indefinitely against directed attacks." Another impact struck, this one precisely targeting the already damaged section. The hunters, reinforcement held, but barely, their forms visibly straining against the external pressure. Whatever was attacking had identified the vulnerability and was now concentrating force against that specific point. "We need to accelerate," Naruto decided, channeling deeper into the cosmic entity's combined power. "I'm going to increase the compression ratio of internal space relative to external coordinates." "Warning," Reina interjected. "Dimensional compression beyond current parameters may induce severe physiological effects in biological organisms. My civilization's experiments with extreme compression ratios resulted in cellular destabilization and quantum uncertainty at the molecular level." The caution was valid, but their alternatives were rapidly diminishing as repeated impacts threatened the passage's structural integrity. The dimensional hunters couldn't maintain reinforcement indefinitely against increasingly precise attacks. "I'll create protective fields around each of us," Naruto countered, already implementing the solution as cosmic energy flowed from his TRANS for med body to envelop each team member in individualized protective cocoons. Localized reality bubbles maintaining consistent physical laws regardless of surrounding compression. The technique R.E. presented yet another application of his developing abilities, reality manipulation at increasingly precise scales. Each protective field maintained normal physical constants for its occupant while allowing the surrounding dimensional passage to compress exponentially. With protections established, Naruto implemented the compression sequence. The passage seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously, distance relationships reconfiguring as space itself condensed. What had been kilometers ahead now approached rapidly, terminus coordinates accelerating toward them as the dimensional construct reorganized its internal geometry. The sensation defied conventional perception. They remained stationary while destination approached, space itself reconfiguring rather than beings moving through it. Several team members appeared disoriented despite protective fields, their consciousness struggling to reconcile the fundamental reordering of spatial relationships. "Terminus approaching," Hinata reported, her evolved perception better equipped to process the dimensional compression. Estimated arrival revised to 17 minutes at current compression ratio. Another violent impact struck the passage, this one powerful enough to breach the hunters' reinforcement temporarily. A tendril of absolute darkness penetrated the crystalline structure before the dimensional creatures could reseal the boundary. Though quickly contained, the brief intrusion left visible corruption, a section of passage transforming from luminous crystal to deadened void material. Direct contamination, Amaterasu identified, concern evident beneath her composed exterior. The Devourer has introduced its essence into the construct. Corruption will spread unless contained. Naruto immediately isolated the affected section, creating dimensional barriers around the contamination to prevent spread. The effort further divided his already strained attention, now simultaneously maintaining the passage, defending against external attacks. sustaining protective fields around teammates, and containing internal corruption. We need to abandon this section, he decided, sensing the corruption's resistance to containment. I'm going to sever the affected portion and reconfigure the passage around it. The procedure resembled dimensional surgery, precisely cutting away corrupted reality while maintaining functional connectivity between remaining healthy sections. The cosmic entities guided his efforts, providing knowledge of dimensional excision techniques beyond anything previously attempted in their world. When completed, the passage had shortened significantly, healthy sections reconnected through compressed junctions that bypassed the removed corruption. The dimensional hunters approved of the solution, their conceptual communication conveying something akin to impressed recognition of his adaptive approach. Terminus in visual range, Hinata announced as the exit point finally appeared ahead. A glowing aperture leading back to conventional reality, though reality now severely distorted by proximity to the Genesis crater's dimensional instabilities. The final minutes of transit proceeded under continuous assault, the Devourer apparently recognizing their imminent escape and increasing attack intensity accordingly. The dimensional hunters struggled to maintain boundary integrity, their forms increasingly destabilized by the effort of reinforcing against superior force. As they approached the terminus, Naruto sensed imminent catastrophic failure in the passage structure. The diamond's ional construct had endured beyond reasonable parameters, but collapse was now inevitable regardless of his efforts. The only question was whether they would reach the exit before complete structural failure. Final approach protocols, he instructed, channeling remaining energy into exit stability rather than overall passage maintenance. We'll need to exit in rapid sequence as the terminus stabilizes. The entire construct will collapse approximately 30 seconds after final transit. Shikamaru immediately organized exit sequence, reverse of their entry order, with Naruto and Hinata last gain to maintain terminus stability until others had safely transitioned. The dimensional hunters would exit simultaneously, their phase-shifting abilities allowing them to transition without disrupting the increasingly fragile aperture. As the first team members approached the exit point, they gained visual confirmation of their destination, the outer perimeter of what could only be the Genesis crater. Even through the distorted terminus aperture, they could perceive a vast depression in the earth where reality itself seemed to bend inward, the origin point of all dimensional instability affecting their world. The exit sequence commenced as the passage began disintegrating behind them, corruption spreading faster than Naruto could contain it. Each team member transitioned through the terminus with momentary disorientation, physical bodies readjusting to conventional physics after hours in the artificial dimensional construct. The dimensional hunters phase shifted through the aperture with practiced ease, their forms temporarily disappearing before remanifesting in conventional reality beyond. Their cooperation throughout the journey had proven invaluable, transforming what might have been impossible passage into merely extremely difficult transit. As Naruto and Hinata prepared for final exit, maintaining terminus stability with combined effort, a catastrophic breach occurred at the passage's far end. The Devourer had finally penetrated the dimensional boundaries completely, its essence flooding the construct with accelerating corruption. Go! Naruto urged Hinata toward the exit, channeling remaining energy into maintaining terminus integrity for her transit. I'll be right behind you. She hesitated only briefly before passing through, her evolved Byakugan maintaining visual connection even as she transitioned realities. Naruto held the terminus open with final reserves of cosmic energy, watching corruption accelerate toward him as the passage collapsed inward from the opposite end. In the last possible moment, he launched himself through the aperture, simultaneously releasing the dimensional construct to complete collapse. The transition hit harder than anticipated, his consciousness momentarily fragmenting across multiple reality states before reconverging in conventional space-time. When awareness fully returned, Naruto found himself lying on solid ground. Team members gathered around with expressions ranging from concern to relief. The dimensional hunters hovered nearby, their forms more unstable in conventional reality but maintaining coherence through adaptations developed during transit. Cutting it rather close, Shikamaru observed with characteristic understatement, offering a hand to help Naruto stand. Rising to his feet, Naruto surveyed their surroundings properly for the first time. They had indeed reached the perimeter of the Genesis crater, a massive depression extending kilometers across the landscape. Unlike conventional impact formations, This crater defied normal geological principles. Its boundaries shifted subtly as they watched, dimensions fluctuating according to principles beyond physical measurement. Most significantly, the crater's center contained what could only be described as a tear in reality itself, a vertical fracture in space-time that pulsed with energies from beyond conventional existence. Surrounding this central rift, smaller fractures radiated outward like cracks in glass, each leaking dimensional energy into the surrounding environment. The origin point, Amaterasu confirmed, recognition and reverence mingling in her tone. Where Kaguya Otsutsuki first breached the dimensional boundaries of our world, forever altering its fundamental nature. And where the Devourer now focuses its primary intrusion attempt, Reina added, cybernetic systems documenting the dimensional anomalies with rapid efficiency. The original tear never fully healed, merely stabilized into semi-permanent equilibrium until recent disturbances. As they observed the crater from safe distance, a structure became visible near the central rift, what appeared to be an ancient temple complex built directly facing the dimensional tier. Unlike the small shrines and monitoring stations they'd encountered previously, this represented monumental architecture on scale suggesting centuries of continuous development. The ancestral temple, Amaterasu identified, genuine emotion breaking through her composed exterior. Primary monitoring facility established by the original witnesses to Kaguya's arrival. My order's most sacred site. And apparently still operational, Shinra observed, indicating movement around the temple complex, robed figures performing what appeared to be maintenance on massive equipment integrated into the ancient structure. The Dimensional Guardians, Amaterasu confirmed. Specialized priesthood dedicated to monitoring and maintaining the original containment systems. They've operated continuously since the First Thinning Era. Their observation was interrupted by alarming development at the crater's center. The primary rift suddenly expanded, energy output increasing exponentially as something began emerging from within the dimensional tier. Unlike the formless darkness of previous Devourer manifestations, this intrusion took deliberate shape, a massive appendage resembling a limb composed of void matter punctuated by structures suggesting articulation points. Primary manifestation in progress, Reina reported, cybernetic eye recording furiously. The entity is attempting physical incarnation rather than mere dimensional intrusion. Can it do that? Shikamaru questioned, strategic mind immediately calculating defense possibilities against such manifestation. Theoretically, with sufficient dimensional weakening, Shinra replied, professional assessment overriding her prisoner status. If the boundary degradation reaches critical threshold, physical transference becomes possible. The implications were catastrophic, the Devourer progressing from influencing their reality through dimensional bleeding to directly entering physical form. Such manifestation would allow it to consume their world from within rather than reaching across dimensional boundaries. We need to reach the temple, Naruto decided, cosmic entities within him responding with urgent consensus to the developing crisis. The Dimensional Guardians may have containment protocols for exactly this scenario. As if in response to his statement, the robed figures around the temple had begun activating ancient mechanisms. Massive structures previously dormant now hummed with increasing energy, focusing toward the expanding rift. Their purpose became clear as energy beams converged on the manifestation attempt, temporarily halting the Devourer's physical emergence. They're implementing containment protocols, Amaterasu confirmed, recognition in her expression. But the stems were designed for maintaining stable equilibrium, not countering active intrusion of this magnitude. The assessment proved accurate as the containment beams faltered against increasing pressure from within the rift. The partially manifested appendage pushed further into their reality despite the ancient technology's resistance, void matter beginning to corrupt physical space around the intrusion point. We need to move now, Naruto urged, cosmic energies flowing visibly beneath his skin as the entities within prepared for confrontation. The containment systems need reinforcement before complete failure. Without waiting for discussion, he channeled the Kaguya aspect spatial manipulation, creating a controlled translocation field around their entire group. Unlike his earlier crude teleportation, this technique maintained perfect relative positioning while instantly shifting their entire team to the temple perimeter. The robed guardians reacted immediately to their sudden appearance, defensive formations establishing around the newcomers until Amaterasu stepped forward, producing ancient identification symbols from within her ceremonial garments. Recognition was instantaneous, the guardians shifting from defensive posture to respectful acknowledgement before returning focus to the failing containment effort. An elder figure separated from the main group, approaching. With urgency tempered by ceremonial dignity, ancient eyes widened upon perceiving Naruto's transformed state, recognition beyond mere observation evident in the guardian's expression. The convergence vessel, the elder identified, using the same term Amaterasu's order had employed. The prophecies manifest in our time of greatest need. We came to help seal the original rift, Naruto explained. Cosmic harmonics underlying his voice as the entities responded to proximity with the dimensional tear that had first connected their world to Kaguya's realm. But we found manifestation already in progress. The ancient systems fail against direct assault, the elder explained, gesturing toward the massive technologies surrounding the temple complex. They were designed to maintain equilibrium, not counter deliberate intrusion. We've implemented all available protocols, but complete containment failure is projected within hours. Inside the containment field, the Devourer's manifestatio N continued progressing despite resistance. The appendage had now extended fully into their reality, anchorage points establishing connection with physical matter that allowed further stabilization of its extra-dimensional form. What information do you have about the original sealing? Naruto asked, the cosmic entities within him seeking specific knowledge about dimensional boundary enforcement techniques that might be applicable. Instead of verbal response, the elder guardian gestured for them to follow into the temple interior. Inside, the ancient structure revealed its true nature, not me. Rely religious edifice but functional monitoring facility built around dimensional science principles predating shinobi civilization by millennia. Central chamber housed what appeared to be a Dimensi. Onal Observatory, technology beyond conventional understanding designed specifically for monitoring boundary conditions between realities. Massive crystalline structures displayed real-time visualization of the tear's condition. Data streams indicating progressive degradation of containment parameters. Most significantly, the chamber contained historical records, stone tablets inscribed with first-hand accounts of Kaguya's arrival and the original dimensional crisis that followed. The elder directed them to specific tablets containing critical information about sealing methodologies implemented during that first intrusion. The original breach required sacrifice, the guardian explained, indicating inscriptions describing the containment process. 666 individuals with specific chakra configurations, forming living seal matrix around the dimensional tier. Their combined life energy created boundary reinforcement that has maintained equilibrium for centuries. A living seal, Shinra murmured. Scientific interest evident despite the grim implications. Biological consciousness as dimensional containment mechanism. Theoretical models suggested possibility, but practical implementation seemed prohibitively costly. The cost was deemed necessary against dimensional collapse, the elder stated simply. Those who formed the original matrix did so willingly, understanding the alternative. Naruto studied the ancient inscriptions, the cosmic entities providing translation of concepts beyond contemporary language. The methodology described was indeed effective. Consciousness itself serving as boundary enforcement between realities, the unique properties of human awareness creating robust dimensional demarcation that mechanical systems couldn't replicate. We don't have 600 specialized chakra users available, he noted, practical concerns immediate despite theoretical appreciation. And the original tear is now actively exploited rather than passively unstable. Perhaps not the same approach, Hinata suggested, her evolved Byakugan studying the dimensional data streams with newfound comprehension. But similar principles applied differently. Your transformed state contains aspects of both realities, Kaguya's dimensional origin and our world. You represent natural bridge between the conflicting systems. The insight aligned with what the cosmic entities had been communicating through Naruto's integrated consciousness, his unique convergence potentially offering solution beyond what conventional sealing techniques could achieve. Not containment, he realized aloud. Reconfiguration. Instead of forcing the boundaries closed against their natural state, we establish new equilibrium parameters incorporating both dimensional frameworks. Theoretical viability uncertain, Reina cautioned, cybernetic calculations processing rapidly. Dimensional reconfiguration at this scale has no precedent in documented cases. The energy requirements alone exceed standard measurement parameters. The convergence provides sufficient energy, Amaterasu countered, understanding evident in her expression. The vessel contains 3 cosmic forces specifically aligned with dimensional manipulation capabilities. As they discussed theoretical approaches, alarming developments manifested outside. The containment systems faltered further, allowing additional devourer components to begin materialization. What had been single appendage now expanded into more complex structure, the beginning of a form that defied conventional biological categorization but clearly represented deliberate physical manifestation. Whatever we're going to attempt, the window of opportunity is closing rapidly, Shikamaru warned, strategic assessment cutting through theoretical discussion. Once that thing fully materializes in our dimension, conventional countermeasures become ineffective. Naruto made his decision, the cosmic entities achieving rare consensus regarding necessary action. I need direct access to the central rift. From there, I can implement dimensional reconfiguration using the convergence energies. The Elder Guardian's expressio N reflected concern despite evident hope. The proximity risks are substantial. No consciousness has directly approached the tear since initial containment establishment. The dimensional exposure could overwhelm even your transformed state. Quote, risks acknowledged, Naruto replied simply. Alternatives insufficient. With approach decided, they moved quickly to implementation planning. The Dimensio Null Hunters had remained with their group, their natural phase-shifting abilities potentially valuable for navigating the increasingly unstable conditions near the rift. Reina's cybernetic systems LD provide real-time analysis of dimensional parameters during reconfiguration attempt. Hinata's evolved Byakugan would monitor Naruto's condition throughout the process, maintaining communication when conventional methods inevitably failed near the tier. Most critically, Amaterasu and the Temple Guardians would implement supporting ritual technologies, ancient systems designed specifically to channel and direct dimensional energies according to predetermined patterns. While insufficient alone against the Devourer's intrusion, these systems could potentially amplify and stabilize Naruto's reconfiguration effort. As preparations finalized, Naruto found moment alone with Hinata atop an observation platform overlooking the central rift. The Devourer's manifestation had progressed alarmingly during their planning session. Multiple appendages now extending into physical reality despite containment efforts. The entity was learning, adapting to resistance with increasing efficiency. The entities believe this will work, he told her quietly, cosmic energies flowing beneath his increasingly translucent skin. But the process will change me further. The level of integration required for dimensional reconfiguration exceeds anything I've attempted previously. Hinata studied him with her transformed eyes, perceiving far more than physical appearance. You fear losing yourself entirely in the convergence. Yes, he admitted simply. To affect reality at the scale required, the boundaries between my consciousness and the cosmic entities may dissolve completely. I can't predict what emerges afterward. She considered this with remarkable calm, the evolution of her own perspective evident in her response. When I first encountered the dimensional anomaly that transformed my Byakugan, I experienced consciousness expansion that terrified me, perception extending beyond conventional understanding, awareness operating across multiple potential states simultaneously. She placed her hand against his chest, where cosmic energies responded to her touch. I discovered something essential during that transformation. Consciousness expansion doesn't necessarily mean identity loss. The core of who you are can remain intact even as perception and capability transcend previous limitations. The insight resonated with something the entities had been attempting to communicate. Her own increasingly integrated awareness, that transcendence need not equate to replacement, that expanded consciousness could incorporate rather than override fundamental identity. I'll find you, she promised with quiet certainty. Whatever you become through this process, I'll recognize the essential Naruto within it. Her confidence provided anchor point amid the looming transformation. Whatever emerged from the impending dimensional reconfiguration, her evolved perception would recognize continuity between present and future states of his being. Final preparations completed with efficiency born of necessity. The Temple Guardians established ceremonial parameters around the central rift, ancient technologies activating in complex sequences designed to create optimal conditions for Naruto's approach. The dimensional hunters positioned themselves at strategic intervals, their natural phase shifting serving as buffer against the most extreme dimensional distortions. As Naruto prepared for direct approach to the rift center, the cosmic entities within him achieved complete consensus, perhaps for the first time since their convergence began. The Kaguya aspect provided intimate knowledge of the tear's original properties, having been directly connected to its formation. The Shinigami aspect contributed understanding of transitional states between existential frameworks. The Arceus aspect offered fundamental principles of reality configuration transcending either dimensional system individually. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.